He's running to use Pennsylvania. Here's a man that spent more than $20 million of his own money to try to buy that seat. I'm also having to talk about something called the Oz rule, that if he's on TV, he's lying. He did that during his career on his TV show. He's done that during his campaign about lying.
I apologize, my audio will suck.
Record here.
Fetterman's already
And
screwed
he's
up a couple
also
times.
lying probably during this debate. And let's also talk about the elephant in the room. I had a stroke. He's never let me forget that. And I might miss some words during this debate, mush two words together, but it knocked me down, but I'm going to keep coming back up. And this campaign is all about, to me, is about fighting for everyone in Pennsylvania that ever got knocked down that needs to get back up, and fighting for all forgotten communities all across Pennsylvania that also got knocked down that needs to get back up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fetterman. Mr. Oz, you are a doctor, a businessman, and television personality. But this is your first run for elected office. What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania? You have 60 seconds.
I'm running for the U.S. Senate because Washington keeps getting it wrong with extreme positions. I want to bring civility, balance, all the things that you want to see, because you've been telling it to me on the campaign trail. And by doing that, we can bring us together in a way that has not been done of late. Democrats, Republicans talking to each other. John Fetterman takes everything to an extreme, and those extreme positions hurt us all. Let's take crime as an example, because it's been such a big problem. Maureen Faulkner accompanied me today to the studio. You know, her husband was a police officer in Philadelphia, was brutally murdered. John Fetterman, during this crime wave, has been trying to get as many murderers convicted and sentenced to life in prison out of jail as possible, including people who are similar to the man who murdered her husband. He does it without with the rest of the parole board agreeing. He's doing it without the families on board. These radical positions extend beyond crime to wanting to legalize all drugs, to open the border, to raising our taxes. I want Washington to be civil again. We need it to be less radical. John Fetterman, unfortunately, would bring that.
Mr. Oz, thank you. Lisa.
All right, gentlemen, on to the economy. Pennsylvanians are struggling to put food on the table and gas in their cars. Our Next Star Emerson College The Hill poll shows the economy and inflation are the biggest concerns for voters. 39% of them listed that as the top issue. Beginning with you, Mr. Oz. You have blamed President Biden and reckless Democratic spending for the inflation crisis. But voters would like to hear your specific plan to cut spending. Please explain in 60 seconds.
Well, if you ask the U.S. government, they'll tell you they have 4% waste and fraud. Now, I've traveled over the Commonwealth and spoken to countless people. There was a lady in Beaver County at a county fair who told me with fear in her heart that she wanted to provide food for her sons, highly nutritious chicken she wanted. She couldn't afford it anymore. That's a big problem. If we've got 4% waste and fraud, we ought to be able to take care of that. John Fetterman's, however, response continually is to raise taxes. He raised taxes as mayor. He tried to raise taxes as a lieutenant governor, 46%. That's a big tax rate. He supported Joe Biden's recent tax rate increase, and he's done that without paying his own taxes 67 times. I'll say that again. He hasn't paid his own taxes 67 times, but he's raising mine and yours. Those are radical positions. They're extreme. They're out of touch with the values of Pennsylvanians. And I can make the difficult decisions, as you do in the operating room as a surgeon. I'll make them cutting our budget as well to make sure we don't have to raise taxes on a population already desperately in pain from the high inflation.
All right. So everyone's cool with this, right? You're going to be, by the time we finish this, everybody's going to be behind on the live stream. So if something crazy happens with Fetterman, because he's speaking through a computer, it's okay. So here's what I'm going to do. Does anyone mind? We'll start this over. I'll do a little introduction, then we'll just go from there. So it's not going to be exactly live. It might be some minutes behind. Everybody's cool with it? All right, let's do that. Hopefully I can get that to work. All right. So, hey, everyone. Thanks for joining me tonight, Normal America Show. So this isn't going to be exactly a live reaction to the debate. As we're speaking, the debate is occurring right now. It's going to be a fantastic debate. I think this is something I'm really looking forward to. First off, I'd like to apologize about my audio and visual issues. Had some problems with some of my equipment accidentally being tossed out. So donations appreciated. I'll try to get some better equipment for the future. But we're going to go ahead. Tonight's debate that we're going to be looking at is between Dr. Oz, who is the Republican candidate here for the Senate race in PA, and he'll be going up against John Fetterman's computer. So you have the stories of sort of John Henry, the great human being going up against machine. And then you have, Gary Kasparov, who faced Deep Blue in a chess championship, with chess, where man's final stand against machine. Today we have the machine, John Fetterman, who had a stroke and is unable to debate himself, and so he'll be using a computer and closed captioning where answers will be pumped into him, but he'll still struggle because he had a stroke and he should actually be at home recovering. But you know how Democrats are. They want people like John Fetterman, like Joe Biden, that they can manage, who don't know where they're at. He'll be going against Dr. Oz, who I don't know is the best candidate. I did not vote for him in the Republican primary, but I still will be supporting him and hope that he proves me pleasantly wrong. Hopefully once Dr. Oz wins, I will be able to hold his feet to the fire. But in all seriousness, if you didn't know, John Fetterman did have a stroke, and he has admitted, despite his campaign saying for months that there was nothing wrong with him, that he has trouble understanding words now during his recovery with a stroke. And so the agreement to this one debate, which Dr. Oz offered a litany of debates, Fetterman only agreed to this debate with all sorts of stipulations, including that he be given a computer with closed captioning because he cannot understand the words that are being said that well, so he has to read them. So it'll be an interesting debate. Even if you're not into politics, it's interesting to see how that will play out. Fetterman has a lot of trouble speaking. Fetterman's sort of a radical type, progressive, Bernie type supporter. You can tell I'm biased. If you're just tuning in, I'm obviously biased. That's who I am. It's my show. I am a conservative. I'm a populist conservative. I would vote for some left-wing people, but no one really in the Democratic Party. I think they are corrupt. The image of corruption and globalism to take away our rights and usher in authoritarianism. Fetterman represents sort of this Bernie Sanders wing of progressivism. And so that will be what's going on. Dr. Oz, I find to be more of an establishment Republican, which I don't have a lot of love for. He was endorsed by Donald Trump. I think it was a mistake by Donald Trump. I preferred Carla Sands or Kathy Barnett, but it is what it is. And so we'll get into the debate. I think that in Pennsylvania, which I do live in Pennsylvania, it makes me a good person to comment on this debate. I will try to be fair and give my opinions when I think either side makes a good point or a bad point. Although I am being upfront with my bias, I hope Oz does better. I'm expecting Oz to do better. I think that I'm also a decent person because I did do policy debate in college, so I know a little about debate, and I think I'm a pretty good debater myself. I also judged debates in college, and I think I'm a pretty good debater myself. So I think in Pennsylvania, the polling and sort of anecdotally, just from talking to people I know in Pennsylvania that are left and right-wingers, I think the economy is the biggest issue. Things like crime are huge issues, not necessarily where I live in rural Pennsylvania, but in the cities, which are very important, such as Erie, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, which were the three big cities here in Pennsylvania. So I expect that to be where Dr. Oz tries to make hay. John Fetterman is not the incumbent. The incumbent is Governor Wolf, who is a Democrat, but Fetterman is the lieutenant governor. And so my keys to winning this debate for Dr. Oz would be to continue to hammer home to the Pennsylvania voters that John Fetterman is the lieutenant governor of this administration, where crime is going through the roof, where the economy is terrible, where they locked us down. And the Wolf administration was hypocrites. They called us cowards if we didn't want to lock down. And then they themselves went out and marched with Black Lives Matter. That's where Dr. Oz could make hay. John Fetterman, I think, could make hay by saying that Oz is sort of someone that's just trying to buy this seat, that he's not a real Pennsylvanian, that he's not a person of the people, and that he's a cold, callous person that's making fun of a stroke victim. I look for Fetterman to sort of try to make those arguments. Now, you might say, but Rob, are you persuaded by those arguments? Not necessarily, but that's what I think he will be able to do best. And then, obviously, each can illustrate their policy positions, but I think that that's primarily where the debate will go. So, without further ado, I will stop when I think that there's something worth talking about. We'll jump right into this debate then.
Remember to use the hashtag PA Senate Debate.
And you may notice these large monitors that are behind us. This is part of our closed captioning system. It was requested by John Fetterman to help him process the questions that we are asking him tonight, and approved by both campaigns, and both candidates can see the monitors.
One of the screens will show only the questions being asked tonight. The second screen will caption the questions.
Apologies for the audio.
From them and
their
ours.
End, not mine.
We have live, experienced captioners in studio to ensure we are as accurate as possible in what's sure to be a fast-paced program.
And just to know, for those of you using closed captioning at home, the captions you see are not tied to the captions that the candidates will see here tonight.
Thank you, Lisa. With that, let's get started.
Can you all hear?
We're going to begin with you. Your political experience includes serving as the mayor of Braddock, a small borough near Pittsburgh, and one term as lieutenant governor. You're running for a seat that could decide the balance of power in Washington. What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi, good night, everybody. I'm running to serve Pennsylvania.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. You hate to do it. Already, right out of the gate, I understand it's nighttime, but good night, everybody? That's where you're going? Okay. Very strange. It would be, I hope everyone's having a good night. I predict you're going to see a lot of gaffes like this. It's going to be very awkwardly paced. I don't think Fetterman was particularly a good speaker anyways. Fetterman's strengths, if I could be honest, before he had a stroke was, he seemed likable if you tended to agree with his positions. He literally seems like a man of the people. He wears dumpy clothes. He seems like kind of an oafish guy. I'm not saying that as an insult, by the way. I'm an oafish guy who wears dumpy clothes. What I'm saying is he seems approachable. And so maybe he could have some of that hokey nature come through, but unfortunately he is just not medically qualified at this point to be a candidate. He's just not. And he was brutally selfish because he knew that he had this stroke during the primary, and if he really wanted a Democrat to win, he could have dropped out. He could have during the primary, but he was selfish. And instead, he's sort of been running a campaign on Twitter through his basement and hiding just how much this has affected him medically. And, you know, if you know the story, he was interviewed on MSNBC here the other day, and the host, or the person who was doing the interview, said before the closed caption was set up, she didn't think he understood what was going on. She didn't understand it. So look for more of these gaffes. It's horrible. Now, I think his policies are terrible. The Wolf administration is one of the worst administrations since I've been an adult in Pennsylvania. It's been absolutely terrible. He's the lieutenant governor of that. He should be connected to that. He agrees with Tom Wolf. It would be more of the same. So I don't think even before the stroke he was a good candidate as far as that I would vote for. But he was good in the sense that he seemed like he could speak to a group of people, which now it's just terrible. He should be at home. It's despicable, to be honest. Very reminiscent of what's going on with Joe Biden. So let's keep our eyes open for more gaffes.
Pennsylvania. He's running to use Pennsylvania. Here's a man that spent more than $20 million of his own money to try to buy that seat. I'm also having to talk about something called the Oz rule, that if he's on TV...
Again, you can see just more choppiness. I won't stop it every time, but you can see that he's struggling with his word choice. And I don't mean this as an insult to say you probably would too if you had a stroke, but you probably shouldn't be running for Senate.
He's lying. He did that during his career on his TV show. He's done that during his campaign about lying about our record here. And he's also lying probably during this debate. And let's also talk about the elephant in the room. I had a stroke. He's never let me forget that. And I might miss some words during this debate. mush two words together, but it knocked me down, but I'm going to keep coming back up. And this campaign is all about, to me, is about fighting for everyone in Pennsylvania that ever got knocked down, that needs to get back up, and fighting for all forgotten communities all across Pennsylvania that also got knocked down, that needs to get back up.
Sounds like they got their microphone set up a little better. Yeah, very choppy. I will say, let me give some props to Fetterman there. Very smart to address the stroke right out of the gate. I think that he sounds terrible. It's going to be hard to cover it up. But that's the best you could do with it. He's right. Address it out front and then make yourself look sympathetic. You know, he won't let me live it down. And listen, I excoriated the Oz campaign because Oz's communication director basically, you know, came out with tweets saying, with comments and then tweets backing up saying, well, if Oz would have ate more vegetables, he would have never had a stroke. You can't do that. Like, you could do that if you're a shit commentator like me, but you can't do that if you're running a campaign, particularly a campaign of someone who's a doctor. And so I think Fetterman really, really needs to not hide, you know, from, he was right to address, yes, I had a stroke, I'm going to have choppy words, that's the right thing to say, and then make yourself look sympathetic. He won't let me down. So he sets the groundwork for that. Other than that, his opening statement was terrible. It's clear that he's sort of mushing words together and thoughts together. Oz's campaign didn't officially say that. Oz's communication director did. They did. I did a whole show on. So we'll see then what Dr. Oz says. So let's move forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fetterman. Mr. Oz, you are a doctor, a businessman, and television personality. But this is your first run for elected office. What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania? You have 60 seconds.
I'm running for the U.S. Senate because Washington keeps getting it wrong with extreme positions. I want to bring civility, balance, all the things that you want to see because you've been telling it to me on the campaign trail. And by doing that, we can bring us together in a way that has not been done of late. Democrats, Republicans talking to each other. John Fetterman takes everything to an extreme, and those extreme positions hurt us all. Let's take crime as an example because it's been such a big problem. Maureen Faulkner accompanied me today to the studio. You know, her husband was a police officer in Philadelphia, was brutally murdered.
Okay, so smart to bring up crime. That is one of the big three issues I think that's important in Pennsylvania. You know, his statement before this, it is clear that they probably focus group that the idea and term civility is something that he needs to talk about. It's probably smart for a general election. It's not an issue that I think is most important, though. So if that's where the primary focus is going to be civility, I don't mind it. It's sort of a talking point, but I think the overarching talking point needs to be crime's out of control, the economy's out of control, the lockdowns are out of control, the border's out of control, and sort of the indoctrination of children and sort of things that are going on with gender reassignment surgery with children and going on with that sort of stuff in our schools. Those are the big five issues that I think he needs to really focus on. Issues that I'm most concerned about are corruption. I don't know how easy it is to win that debate for a general election. And so I think that you should go with the economy and things like that. Why is my audio cracking? I'm not in my home studio. At the studio that I'm at, someone threw away my microphone, so I have to use my headset as my microphone. So that's why the quality sucks. The channel that this debate is on, what I'm streaming it from is WPXI's YouTube channel is where I'm streaming it from. So let's keep going.
Fetterman, during this crime wave, has been trying to get as many murderers convicted and sentenced to life in prison out of jail as possible, including people who are similar to the man who murdered her husband. He does it without with the rest of the parole board agreeing. He's doing it without the families on board. These radical positions extend beyond crime to wanting to legalize all drugs, to open the border, to raising our taxes. I want Washington to be civil again. You need it to be less radical. John Fetterman, unfortunately, would bring that.
Mr. Oz, thank you. Lisa.
A little mealy mouth there at the end. One of the things that is very difficult in a debate to end right when the timer goes off. I give some leeway to that, obviously. Finish your sentence, go 5-10 seconds over, that's not a problem. But I do get a little it's a little pet peeve of mine if people just continue to go way over that. It's a fine line. You don't want to look too weak like Biden, just saying, oh, my time's up, and just stop. You don't want to look like that. But, you know, as far as opening statements go, this is fine by Oz. I'm not blown away. I think he starts lining up the crime right away. He makes it personal, says, I'm here with someone whose husband was killed. Fetterman sort of, and for those that don't know, Fetterman has been to his admission, wants to let violent criminals out of prison. He wants to end sort of long life sentences, I think, for second-degree murder and things of that nature. So let's see where it goes from here.
All right, gentlemen, on to the economy. Pennsylvanians are struggling to put food on the table and gas in their cars. Our Nexstar Emerson College The Hill poll shows the economy and inflation are the biggest concerns for voters. 39% of them listed that as the top issue. Beginning with you, Mr. Oz. You have blamed President Biden and reckless Democratic spending for the inflation crisis. But voters would like to hear your specific plan to cut spending. Please explain in 60 seconds.
Well, if you ask the U.S. government, they'll tell you they have 4% waste and fraud. Now, I've traveled over the Commonwealth and spoken to countless people. There was a lady in Beaver County at a county fair who told me with fear in her heart that she wanted to provide food for her sons, highly nutritious chicken she wanted. She couldn't afford it anymore. That's a big problem. If we've got 4% waste and fraud, we ought to be able to take care of that. John Fetterman's, however, response continually is to raise taxes. He raised taxes as mayor. He tried to raise taxes as a lieutenant governor, 46%. That's a big tax rate. He supported Joe Biden's recent tax rate increase, and he's done that without paying his own taxes 67 times. I'll say that again. He hasn't paid his own taxes 67 times, but he's raising mine and yours. Those are radical positions. They're extreme. They're out of touch with the values of Pennsylvanians. And I can make the difficult decisions, as you do in the operating room as a surgeon. I'll make them cutting our budget as well to make sure we don't have to raise taxes on a population already desperately in pain from the high inflation rate.
Mr. Fetterman.
It's not a bad answer. I think the better answer is he should have talked about lockdowns there and how that led to sort of the stifling of the economy. He's right to talk about the fraud. That is correct. It's difficult to impart that in 60 seconds, that billions of dollars that were spent were taken away through fraudulent practices, which is probably why we should let people keep more of their own money instead of sending it to the government and having them dole it out to people. The problem is, I would have said this, the problem is people like Fetterman and the Wolf administration and the Biden administration who wants to take more of your money, then lock you down, and then say, oh, trust us to print more money in order to save you from the problems we caused. That would have been the better answer for us there, but okay, it was a fine answer, I guess. Let's see what Fetterman says.
I will allow a 15-second rebuttal. He has specifically said you have not paid your taxes and that you want to raise...
Sandman, feel free to leave this channel. This is me commentating on the debate. I asked people at the beginning of this if they would like me to pause and give my comments. There are plenty of channels that are just showing the debate without commentary. You can feel free to go there. You sack of shit who's trying to be rude to me, who I have no respect for. So just throw that out there for you.
Raise taxes on Americans. How do you respond?
Absolutely. The Oz rule, of course, is lying. It was helping two students 17 years ago to help them, buy their own homes. They didn't pay the bills, and it got her paid. And it has never been an issue in any of the campaign before. It was all about nonprofit.
Wait, what?
All right, thank you, Mr. Fetterman. Continuing with
what did he
desperately
what did he even say?
He said you have not paid your taxes and that you want to raise...
Like, what is this? I'm going to try to listen to this again. This is so mushmouth. Let's...
Taxes on Americans. How do you respond?
So the question is, you didn't pay your taxes, but you want to raise taxes. How do you respond? What does he say here?
Absolutely. The Oz rule, of course, is lying. It was helping two students 17 years ago to help them, buy their own homes. They didn't pay the bills, and it got her paid. And it has never been an issue in any of the campaign before. It was all about nonprofit.
What? That is. I don't even. Oh my God. This is pathetic. This is embarrassing. I hope it can. This is worse than I thought it would be. And you could tell he's nervous. I honest to God feel terrible for him. You could tell he's nervous. Look at that still image right there. Oh man, what? That doesn't even remote. Like I don't even know what he's talking about. You didn't pay your taxes, but you want to raise taxes. And him Oz through, it was Dr. Oz roll, he lying. It was 17 years, help to students. Wow. Unbelievable. Right? Let's keep going.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fetterman. Continuing with you, Mr. Fetterman, your opponent has criticized Democratic spending, as you heard. Has the Biden administration overspent? And if so, where do you think spending should be cut? You have 60 seconds.
No, here's what I think we have to fight about inflation here right now. That's what we need to fight about inflation, right now, because it's a tax on working families, and Dr. Oz can't possibly understand what that is like. He has 10 gigantic mansions. We must push back against corporate greed. We must make sure that we're also pushing back against price gouging as well, too. We also be able to make more in Pennsylvania, make more in America. When he had a choice to make his merchandise, the Oz label is on, he made it all in China. Who can you believe that can fight against inflation and pushing back against corporate greed, or somebody that is choosing working in China versus over American workers?
All right, I will allow 15 seconds.
It's really bad. It's just really bad. It's reminiscent of when I would judge debates at the lower level, at the entry level of debate. And it was clear sometimes you would have people that were doing debate tournaments because they had to for class. And there were people that you would see that would have trouble reading. And they would it was clear they didn't want to be there. That's what I'm... Can someone... Do I have a mod? Could you boot Sandman? Thank you. One of my mods could remove him. See you later, Sandman. For those that are watching, I'm trying to read the chats as well. Again, I already set this up. This is just me commentating on this. This is what my audience wanted to see. People that are telling me to shut up are free to go watch somewhere else. But yeah, it's very interesting. He really doesn't want to be there, and I understand why. He just sounds so choppy, and he can't really make articulate points and go into minute details. So... That's obvious. It's perceptually, it's bad, and a lot of these debates have to do about perception. Famously, there was a debate between JFK and Nixon that occurred, and people that listened to the debate on the radio thought Nixon won. But the way that they carried themselves, because Nixon had a cold and JFK was a better-looking guy and presented himself, better image-wise, the people that watched on television thought he won. Perception matters, and perceptually right now, Fetterman looks terrible. Specifically about his claims here, where would you cut back on inflation? I guess he makes two arguments. Oz built things in China, and we need to end corporate greed. And we need to build more stuff in Pennsylvania. These actually aren't bad points, but you can't just say those words. It's just like it's almost like there's someone in his earpiece saying, we talked about inflation, remember, corporate greed, and he built things in China, remember those? So he's repeating those words, but he forgets what the actual talking points were on those words. So, yeah, it's really bad.
Second rebuttal to his comments that you have been making things in China. Mr. Oz.
Well, I've been trying to talk about policy issues with the people of Pennsylvania. As a doctor, I listen to their ideas and I want to talk about them. When John Fetterman brings up houses, the irony is he didn't pay for his own house. He got it for $1 from his sister. And he hasn't been able to earn a living on his own. He's lived off his parents. So it's not a topic that we should be debating on the stage. We should be talking about crime and inflation, the issues that are hurting Pennsylvanians that they're talking about at their kitchen table.
That's it. He got his Pennsylvania house from his own inlays from $1.
Mr. Fetterman, we have to continue on. We'll continue on with the...
Oh, my goodness. Honestly, Fetterman's hamstrung here. Imagine how frustrating it would be. It's bad. It's bad. At this point, it's just like piling on. But imagine if you're Fetterman and literally you're having trouble picking up spoken language, and so you're having to read this through a closed caption. And, in the natural context of a debate, you jab back and forth. But he's so wooden. His language is so choppy. He's not going to be able to get in to those sorts of, well, wait a minute, you did that too. Like, for example, if you watch the DeSantis-Chris debate, there's little jabs that are going back and forth. Fetterman's not going to be able to do that. And it's going to come off looking really bad.
question, a follow-up question to you, Mr. Oz. This one is just for you. You tweeted in August that you will never stop fighting to lower gas prices for Pennsylvanians. Does that include supporting a suspension of the federal gas tax? You have 30 seconds.
I'm supportive of reducing taxes, but we want to be thoughtful about the long-term game plan to get gas taxes down and, frankly, all energy prices down. I have gone around the Commonwealth. I've witnessed people say, I'm not going on vacation this year because I can't afford to pay to take my trailer to the campground. They can't even get there. What we have to do is ensure that we don't have increased inflation, and the best way to do that is reduce gas prices. John Fetterman has gone after the energy industry, called it a stain on Pennsylvania, and argued we have to ban fracking. That is disconnected from Pennsylvania.
That's smart. And he should also say, it's not a bad answer. He didn't directly answer the tax question, but sometimes you don't have to directly answer the question. He is right. The way you take this is, if we're talking about energy, him, Tom Wolf, the administration he was in, wanted to ban fracking. That's a huge issue here in Pennsylvania. Energy independence in Pennsylvania. We're sitting on a ton of potential energy, which this current administration that Fetterman's part of has basically restricted. So it's a decent answer there, even if it didn't directly answer the question. So I don't disagree. Can't be canceled says Oz should probably come out and just say what everyone's thinking. What am I doing here? It's difficult. He has to run a fine line. I think that probably the better tactic is to say something politely about it at some point in the debate. Like, listen, I'm not trying to be rude, but it is clear that you don't have the comprehension to sort of keep up in this debate. And Pennsylvania deserves, and the United States for that matter, deserves someone who is of health and of clear mind enough to be able to fight for them and to come up with sort of discussions and agreements amongst multiple people to have the best policies going forward. And it's clear that my opponent right now is not in the condition to be able to do that. He probably should address that, but he doesn't want to go overboard. He doesn't really need to address it, though, because everyone watching sees it, and then all of his people or people that support him or people like me will be able to commentate on it later. So let's hear what Fetterman says.
Thank you, Mr. Oz. We will get to the issue of fracking later on in this discussion. But meantime, turning back to you, Mr. Fetterman, for a follow-up. In an op-ed for the Wilkes-Barre Times Leader, you wrote, quote, "It is time we crack down on the big price gouging corporations that are making record profits while jacking up prices for all of us." How do you plan to do this, sir? You mentioned going after price gouging corporations. How do you plan to do this? You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. We have to keep pushing back on that. And he would never make that choice to fight for families here in Pennsylvania. You know, he has never met an oil company that he doesn't swipe right about. You know, he has never been able to stand up for working families all across Pennsylvania. You know, we must push back. Inflation has hurt Americans and Pennsylvania's families, and it has given the oil companies record profits.
All right, thank you, Ms.
Okay. Now, again, not good, but that was the best answer he's had yet. He actually flowed a little there. Swipe right. He's mixing up his words and things like that. These are just empty cliches, though, right? Of course, he's making an argument. Okay, let me try to put this in the best light possible, right? So one of the mistakes that Biden administration continually makes is bragging how good the economy is doing. Fetterman's not making that mistake here, which is actually smart, right? He is saying, you're right, you're suffering from inflation. He has to say that. If they don't say that, they're going to lose. Because that's true. That's what Pennsylvanians are worried about. They're suffering. And so he has to put the blame somewhere, and they're going to put the blame on those greedy corporations. And so it's not that the government spent too much money or the government locked this down. It's the greedy corporations. But notice that it's just sort of cliches. You know, it's I'll go after the corporations, he won't. But in what way? I'm not saying Dr. Oz is being very specific either, but it really comes off as evident that Fetterman just has bare line talking points, you know, that, okay, they say inflation, you mention Oz's house, you mention corporate greed, you know, and there's nothing to it. You can even hear that Fetterman stopped before the bell rang, like he had nothing more to say. It's not good. It's so far it's very embarrassing, but maybe it'll get better because that was his best answer thus far.
Mr. Fetterman, turning to the next issue, Dennis.
The minimum wage in Pennsylvania and at the national level currently sits at $7.25 an hour and has not been increased since 2009. Each of our neighboring states has raised minimum wages. You see them there on your screen, including New Jersey at $13 an hour and West Virginia at $8.75. But Pennsylvania has not followed suit. The first question is for you, Mr. Fetterman. Do you support raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour? Why or why not? You have 60 seconds.
Yeah, I do, absolutely. I think it's a disgrace at $7.25 an hour. And how can a man, with 10 gigantic mansions, has willing to talk about a willing wage for anybody? Imagine a single mom with 2 children, trying to raise with them, realizing making $31,000 a year, $15 an hour. I believe every work has dignity, and every paycheck must have dignity in it as well. True, I've always supported a living wage, and we make sure that everyone has economic security.
I have a follow-up for you.
Okay. Let's say the positives of this first. He affirmatively answered he would support a $15 minimum wage. That's an answer. But his mush-mouth response, again, he's mushing words together. You can see what's happening, that he's just putting thoughts together and words together that don't necessarily fit in. 31,000. Well, what do you mean 31? Imagine in a mansion and 31,000, and it's bad. It just perceptually is bad. And what I want you all to take from this, this is the ideal Democrat candidate. This is why they like Joe Biden so much. The people that will mock you and say, we're the party of science, we're the party of intelligence, they'll put this in front of you, and they'll gaslight you that this isn't a problem. It's surreal. That's where we're at. Imagine that as our government gets stronger and stronger, and there's more and more division in this country, and there's more and more importance being put on these sort of Senate races, and this is what we're voting for? Do I actually like Oz? Not particularly. He wasn't my choice, but he's way better than Fetterman.
You, Mr. Fetterman, what do you say to small business owners who have told us that if the minimum wage were increased to $15 an hour, it would put them out of business? You have 30 seconds.
No, we all have to make sure that everyone that works is able to, that's the most American bargain, that if you work full-time, you should be able to live in dignity as well, true. And I believe they haven't have any businesses being we can't have businesses being subsidized by not paying individuals that just simply can't evade to pay their own way.
Okay, Mr. Fetterman, thank you.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Honestly, to the people watching, is everyone think this is as bad as I do? I mean, it's just sad, isn't it? It's so bad. It is hard to... It's not that it's a weak response. He can't talk. I think this is worse than Biden most of the time. Biden could get through at least some talking points. He has glaring moments, but this is every single thing. I feel bad for him. I really do. This is sad. It's so bad. Is it anyone? Now, we were told over and over by his campaign that there was nothing wrong with him, that they weren't running from debates. When Oz kept saying, I want to do multiple debates, they said, we're not running from them. It's obvious. Achilles, I already kind of answered it. I'll answer it one more time because I like you, Achilles. He could point it out in some way, but it's not necessary. You have to be, again, the number one defense that Fetterman's going to have, and the way to turn this condition into an offense is to garner sympathy. And so if Oz comes off as bullying too much, as, oh, look, he can't even talk, it's not a good look for him. I already said that what I would say is, look, it's clear that Pennsylvania and the United States deserve someone who's able in these contentious times to sit down with groups of people and come up with the best possible arguments, to be a very busy working schedule, and someone who's going to have to be communicating over and over with a multitude of people to deal with the very significant issues that we're facing with crime, to facing with the economy, to facing with the border. And it's clear that my opponent's not in the medical condition to be able to do that, as is evident from this debate tonight. I wish him well. I hope that he has a full recovery. But right now, at this crucial time for Pennsylvania, for the United States, clearly he is not capable of doing this. That's what I would say. But he's not. Dr. Oz isn't as good as me. So, all right, let's keep going. By the way, substantively, when he meandered through there, he didn't respond to that question at all. He just keeps saying the phrase dignity, dignity of work, living wage. But the question is, but there are certain employers that are saying that would put them out of business. And he just says, well, we shouldn't. I guess the answer is we shouldn't subsidize with, welfare, things of that nature. So that's a big FU to those businesses, basically. Sorry.
Mr. Oz, turning to you. Do you support raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour? Why or why not? You have 60 seconds.
I think market forces have already driven up the minimum wage. I was with a hotel worker actually here in Harrisburg a few months ago, and he was telling me how hard it was to live on the $15 an hour that he was getting paid. John Fetterman shoots too low. We want much more money than that. And there are many ways to achieve that, but John Fetterman thinks the minimum wage is his weekly allowance from his parents. He's not really cognizant of the real challenges of business owners who've got to balance that with employees. Thankfully, we have a solution. And John, you didn't answer the question. You can't put businesses out of commission in order to pay more wages because the wages will go to zero, which is John Fetterman's radical plan if you really follow to conclusion. Here's what I would do. We have one of the richest energy states in the country. I believe if we could unleash the energy beneath our feet here in Pennsylvania, there'd be plenty of money to go around. We'd have increased wages, a more reason for students to take vocational classes to be able to learn trades, which I'm strongly supportive of. We'd also be able to pipe that gas, improve our economy, and reduce inflation. That's a plan that works, and it's humble enough that I can say broadly.
Thank you. I want to give you.
All right. So he could have answered this better. He does right in saying that he's going to put businesses out. That's true. But he doesn't specifically answer the question of would you vote for a mandated $15 federal wage. It's clear that he's implying that he wouldn't, but he would be clear to just say, no, I'm against that because of the reasons you already said. That by the way, that's a really good image of Dr. Oz there. He's got the bitter beer face going. But he should have said, no, forcing that. Each place is different. There are, the wage necessary to live in Portland is different than the wage necessary to live in Braddock, or the wage necessary to live in Clarion County, or Tynesta, or those sorts of places. And so a federal minimum wage isn't the answer. However, I do have the answer, which is unleashing our energy sector, spending less, etc. So the second part of his answer is fine. But I do think he's being a little chippy, going with, well, his parents pay him. Like, you don't have to keep saying that. If I had a criticism of, I would say that. I would say that he should cut back on that because at this point, it's like, you're already crushing this guy as far as he can't even speak. So you don't want to look like you're just kicking dirt on someone when they're down. You just say, nah, his plans are really bad. Yeah, you don't have to keep going back to the well of his parents' paper. It's okay to say that, but to keep using it as sort of an insult, I just think it's not helping Dr. Oz at this point. Not that it's like a deal breaker or anything, but.
You, Mr. Fetterman, a 15-second follow-up to what he just said about you.
No, again, it's remarkable. He hasn't really had any answer that he actually had about that. He doesn't want to talk about having somebody having a living wage and having somebody able to survive again.
And I want to come back to you now, Mr. Oz, for a quick follow-up.
Again, not the worst comment that he's had there, but he just says he didn't have an answer. He did answer, but I do think that if you're on the progressive side of this, this is the argument that you make, that we respect people. They need to be dignity in work. You should be able to raise your family on minimum wage, but not a very good, no real low point there compared to what we've seen from Fetterman so far. Still choppy with his language, but not a terrible answer.
What do you say to those Pennsylvanians that he just spoke of that are trying to survive on $7.25 an hour, which is less than all of our neighbors? You have 30 seconds.
Oh, I don't think you should have to survive on $7.25 an hour. I want the minimum wage up as high as it can go. I want to highlight that I have an agenda for prosperity, unlike John Fetterman. I want us all getting paid a lot more than $15. And I answered your question directly in a way that would preserve business owners, job creators, so they thrive, and we'd have lots more employees entering the workforce and then prospering, getting paid $25, $35, $45 an hour. But we're never going to get there if we don't unleash our energy. And John Fetterman's stubbornness on calling it a strain on Pennsylvania is an insult to those workers.
To be clear, you said you want...
Again, not a bad answer, but he is, and I think they're going to clarify right here, so I'll leave it go in just a second, but he is being a little ambiguous as to whether he would vote to raise the minimum wage. He's basically saying, well, who cares about the minimum wage? Everyone will be making more money if we unleash the energy sector. But Fetterman's right, and that's not a direct answer. I think it's a good answer, but it doesn't directly answer that question about whether or not we should have a law to raise the minimum wage.
On people making a lot more, but that's not through a federal law of minimum wage. That's through market forces.
Market forces should drive it up anyway, and it's already done that.
Thank you.
You know, you should be able to get paid much more than $15 an hour.
Thank you. Lisa.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Another big issue for voters is abortion. Mr. Oz, we will begin with you. You say that you're pro-life, but you do support abortion exceptions in the cases of rape, incest, and to protect the life of the mother. Aside from those three exceptions, should abortion be banned in America? 60 seconds.
There should not be involvement from the federal government in how states decide their abortion decisions. As a physician, I've been in the room when there's some difficult conversations happening. I don't want the federal government involved with that at all. I want women, doctors, local political leaders, letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive to put the best ideas forward so states can decide for themselves. Contrast that with my opponent, John Fetterman, who on this debate stage said that he would demand federally mandated rules for all states they have to follow that would allow abortion at 38 weeks on the delivery table, and he would force it to be subsidized by taxpayers across the country no matter what their personal beliefs are. That's radical. That's extreme. That is out of touch with what the average voter in Pennsylvania believes is appropriate. Now, ironically, John Fetterman's been running ads on this topic, dishonest ads. I need to correct the record. They were so bad, they got pulled off television stations. Even on this station, he was running dishonest ads that I had pulled off. I haven't had a single ad pulled down. My ads tell the truth. John Fetterman's are a fiction of his imagination.
All right.
Aside from the ad answer to that, that's actually a very good answer. I was asked what I thought a palatable message would be for Oz by some people involved in politics, and I suggested that Oz should say almost exactly what he said, that we should leave it up to the states. Now, that might not thrill you as someone who maybe wants abortion totally banned. You might say, I don't like that answer. But it's the correct answer as far as trying to win a general election. And it's also the most practical answer that you should be happy with, because there's just not going to be a federal ban on abortion. Even if Republicans win the Senate with 53, 54 seats, they're not going to be able to have the vote to have an all-out federal ban on abortion. It's just not going to happen. And so the next best thing is to say, listen, I think it should be left up to each individual state to decide. So in other words, he's saying, that's not really in my purview as a senator. I will not vote. What he's doing is he is assuaging maybe the voter that thinks that you should have some form of abortion, but is really turned off by inflation, by crime, etc. Right? And what he's saying is, look, don't vote against me because you're afraid that I'm going to say no, 0 abortions ever. That's not what I'm saying. And I think that that's smart. The other part of the answer that's very smart and is the actual thing to do is to point out that Fetterman's position and the Democrats' position is basically federally allowing abortions to occur whenever a woman and her doctor wants, even if it's on the delivery table. That is disgusting. That is one of the most immoral positions that you can imagine. And so that's where you go on offense on this position. And I think that Dr. Oz is absolutely right to say he wants you to have your tax dollars pay for abortions and wants the government to say that any woman should be allowed to have any abortion she wants as long as the doctor is able to agree to perform it. That is the correct answer. So I think Oz's answer there is actually very good.
I'm going to let Mr. Fetterman respond specifically about the ads being pulled off the air, and then we will return to you, Mr. Oz. Mr. Fetterman.
Yeah, I want to look into the face of every woman in Pennsylvania. You know, if you believe that the choice of your reproductive freedom belongs with Dr. Oz, then you have a choice. But if you believe that the choice for abortion belongs between you and your doctor, that's what I fight for. Roe v. Wade, for me, should be the law. He celebrated when Roe v. Wade went down, and my campaign would fight for Roe v. Wade, and if given the opportunity, to codify it into law.
And that's actually a concise answer. That's so far the best. I don't agree with that position, but as far as for the purpose of the debate, smart, that's an issue that you want to go after with women. and it's ambiguous enough that it doesn't respond to exactly the question about the ads being pulled, and it doesn't respond to, you want 38-week abortions to be able to occur. So that is the direction that Fetterman probably wants to take with this. But again, not responsive to the question, but as far as being articulate, for one, that's passable. The way he just talked there was passable. That's the best he sounded. And that is an on-point message that the Democrats are trying to deliver.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fetterman. Going back to you, I want to circle back to something that you said, Mr. Oz. You mentioned the decision to regulate abortion should be something that is left up to the states. Now, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham has introduced a federal bill to ban abortion after 15 weeks. I know that you've been asked about this question before. If the vote were held today, you were elected senator, you're on the Senate floor, the clerk calls you, there's a roll call vote. Are you a yay or a nay? How would you vote on the Lindsey Graham bill? You have 30 seconds.
Lisa, I don't even need 30 seconds. I'll give you a bigger answer. I am not going to support federal rules that block the ability of states to do what they wish to do. The abortion decision should be left up.
What happened? Uh-oh, my feed. One second. Let me make sure. Is this on my end? Wait.
And respond specifically about...
I absolutely...
A lifelong...
Oh, boy. That's terrible. I guess we're just going to skip that section. Very good answer by Dr. Oz there. It's a very good answer, right? He didn't shrug from the question. He said, absolutely not. Yeah, a good answer. Unfortunately, we'll skip past the abortion exchange until we get to this.
And that is the issue of fracking. Pennsylvania only trails Texas in terms of natural gas production. Both of you have taken shifting positions on the issue of fracking. Mr. Oz, we begin with you. You wrote a column in 2014 calling for no fracking pending health study results. But in a video posted on social media in March, you said, quote, natural gas guarantees high-paying skilled jobs right here in Pennsylvania, so back off Biden, give us freedom to frack. Mr. Oz, please explain that changing position. 60 seconds.
I've been very consistent. Fracking has been demonstrated. It's a very old technology to be safe. It is a lifeline for this Commonwealth to be able to build wealth, similar to what they've been able to achieve in other states. For that reason, I strongly support fracking, drilling, the piping of that natural gas. In fact, I'd build a facility even in Philadelphia so we can export it to our allies and help them, the ones that are struggling now in Eastern and Western Europe because of the Ukrainian war. John Fetterman calls fracking a stain on Pennsylvania. He says that he would sign a moratorium to ban its continued use. He's against pipelines. He voted or supported the vote against the Keystone pipeline that ended up shutting it down. He supports Biden's desire to ban fracking on public lands, which are our lands, all of our lands together. This is a extreme position on energy. If we unleashed our energy here in Pennsylvania, it would help everybody. Why John Fetterman is so rigidly stuck on fighting against energy companies is stunning to me, because it's the jobs I want. Tens of thousands of high-paying jobs to help Pennsylvanians.
Thank you, Mr. Oz.
It's not a bad answer. That's absolutely right. They should be pushing for fracking. They should be pushing for energy independence. They should be calling out sort of the radical left and their anti-energy positions that are leading to high gas prices, that are leading to so much of the economic devastation all around the country and in places like Pennsylvania. And that is the position that Democrats have staked out for themselves. So good answer there from Dr. Oz.
Oz rule.
Mr. Fetterman, 15
I absolutely support fracking. In fact, I live across the street from a steel mill, and they were going to frack to create their own energy in order to make them more competitive. And I support that, living closer to anybody else in Pennsylvania for fracking to myself. I believe that we need independence with energy, and I believe I've walked that line my entire career. I believe...
What?
Democrats...
Mr. Fetterman, I do have a specific...
What? That's news to me. As Lieutenant Governor, I don't recall John Fetterman ever once speaking up when Tom Wolfe was criticizing fracking. I don't recall this ever. Ever. I'll have to look up after the debate some actual sources, but I don't recall that ever being said. Okay, we'll see. Maybe they'll leave Oz respond. I don't know. But that seems like a change in position to me. And what that shows you is that in these swing states, despite the Greta Thunberg sort of rhetoric that comes from Democrats, when it comes to actually winning general elections in swing states, they know that that's not a popular answer.
Question, which you can continue on this topic, but you have made two conflicting statements regarding fracking. In a 2018 interview, you said, quote, I don't support fracking at all. I never have. But earlier this month, you told an interviewer, quote, I support fracking. I support the energy independence that we should have here in the United States. So, Mr. Fetterman, please explain your changing position. 60 seconds.
I've always supported fracking, and I always believe that independence with our energy is critical, and we can't be held, ransom to somebody like Russia. I've always believed that energy independence is critical, and I've always believed that, and I do support fracking. I've never taken any money from their industry, but I support how critical it is that we produce our own energy and create energy independence.
I must correct the record.
Just a second, Mr. Oz. I do want to clarify something. You're saying tonight that you support fracking, that you've always supported fracking, but there is that 2018 interview that you said, quote, I don't support fracking at all. So how do you square the two?
I do support fracking, and I support fracking, and I stand, and I do support fracking.
Okay.
Oh my God. Wow. That's unreal for two reasons. One, is it just me, or is Dr. Oz debating the people I debate all the time? They just rewrite history. I support it. It's the Shaggy defense. Wasn't me. You have to have something. Well, I changed when I was saying that, when I was asked specifically about that, I meant, do I support taking money from the fracking industry? Of course I don't. But the actual practice of fracking, if done with regulation and oversight, is something that's important to Pennsylvania and something that's important to making us more energy independent. I think if we combine fracking with more green energy policies, we'll be able to get off of fossil fuels from countries like OPEC and countries like Russia, have secure energy independence, and successfully fight back the worst impacts of climate change that will affect our children and grandchildren going forward. That's me off the top of my head with the Democratic position. Now, how much better does that sound than I support fracking? I've always supported fracking. That's just wow. Just being gaslit. I guess I'm looking into this. This isn't a shrewd move. The man's in trouble medically. He doesn't have the ability to articulate lies that normal politicians are able to. So the lies are as transparently obvious as we all know them to be. You said you never supported fracking. Now you're saying you support it because you realize that you're going to lose the election because people are upset about energy independence and are upset about the economy. But you can't come up with a clever way to say, well, here's why I changed my position. And so you just muddle through? Honest to goodness, any left-winger that's from Pennsylvania here, are you really satisfied that this is going to be a guy that could fight for Pennsylvanians in Congress? And by the way, so far, absolute shout-out and kudos to these two moderators. I think they're doing a terrific job. I think both candidates, they've said, no, wait a minute, you've said this. They've asked follow-ups that were relevant. They've cut them off when appropriate. Well, the abortion question, I didn't get to hear the end of it. But so far, the moderators have been good. I'll see if I can find that clip that the audio went out in the abortion question here later. That was terrible. That's the worst he sounded. Blatantly lying, and just, I mean, let's go back and watch that section again. This is brutal.
And I always believe that independence with our energy is critical, and we can't be held, ransom to somebody like Russia. I've always believed that energy independence is critical, and I've always believed that, and I do support fracking. I've never taken any money from their industry, but I support how critical it is that we produce our own energy and create energy independence.
I must correct the record.
Just a second, Mr. Oz. I do want to clarify something. You're saying tonight that you support fracking, that you've always supported fracking, but there is that 2018 interview that you said, quote, "I don't support fracking at all." So how do you square the two?
This is brutal.
I do support fracking, and I support fracking, and I stand, and I do support fracking.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fetterman.
I'm sorry, Lisa.
I mean, it's clear that he doesn't have the mental capacity for this, and I mean, it's honestly sad. It's clear that they were like, I don't know if they got the questions beforehand or not. There was an argument going on as whether or not the topics would be given out beforehand. But even if not, so far these are topics that his team would have been able to prepare him for. And it's clear that they were just like, dude, one talking point on everything. On fracking, I support fracking. I support energy independence. That's it. That's all he's capable of saying. I mean, that's bad. That is so bad. This is, honestly, I'm saying, I was ready to come in. People could go back and watch the beginning of my stream here. I was ready to come in and make fun, for God's sakes, the title of my video is Dr. Oz versus Fetterman's computer. I thought Fetterman would sound competent. He would struggle, but sound better than this, and that I would be kind of ripping him off. I just come off feeling bad. This is much worse than I anticipated. It's surreal. I can't wait to be gaslit by the national media how great he sounded. That to me is going to be what to look forward to after this debate. Every one of us watching right now, left wing or right wing, are like, wow, he looks so bad. This is actually very sad for this man. And we're going to be told by a litany of people on the left and in the media, oh, he did great. That's what we're going to be told. Shame on Fetterman's wife for putting him out there. Shame on the Democrats for putting him out there. Shame on his team for not telling him when he had a stroke during the primaries, now is the time to back out so that another Democrat could come in. Shame on all of them. This is sad. It's absolutely pathetic. I don't even know what to say. Let's just keep moving.
But there's not just a statement you read.
No! What happened? All right. For some reason, the video went out. Let's see what. 27. Video unavailable. All right. That's brutal. Can someone send me a link if they somehow that place I was watching set it to private, the video to private?
Pennsylvania's families and
all business owners who have told us that if the minimum Pat Toomey supported bill. If you
I would have tried to improve that bill.
You have 60 seconds.
I have kinds of aberrations, but John, the city was dangerous under your leadership, and that's why I want to turn to commented. The energy
we have to move on. Don't support fracking at all. So how do you square the two?
All right, I think I found a new clip. Hopefully, it sounds better audio-wise too.
I do support fracking, and I I support fracking, and I do support fracking.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fetterman.
I'm sorry, Lisa, but there's not just a statement you read. There are multiple. There's pictures of him signing a moratorium.
We have to move on.
But we have to get the fundamentals of the truth out here. John Fetterman over and over again took positions against energy.
We have a lot of topics. You will have a chance to have that in your
closing. One comment then. The energy industry is living in fear of John Fetterman. I want to know why.
Mr. Oz, we want to now turn to public safety.
Decent moderation.
Mr. Fetterman, Republicans have called you dangerously soft on crime. The Pennsylvania State Troopers Association has endorsed Democrat Josh Shapiro for governor. But in this race, it endorsed your Republican opponent, Mr. Oz. What is your response to those endorsements? And what is your response to accusations that you are, quote, dangerously soft on crime? You have 60 seconds.
No. I believe that I run on my record on crime. You know, I ran to be mayor back in 2005 in order to fight gun violence, and that's exactly what I did. In working with the police and working with our community, I was able to stop gun violence for 5.5 years as mayor, ever accomplished before or since my time as mayor, because I'm the only person on this stage right now that was successful about pushing back against gun violence and being the community more safe. You know, all he's done is just put a plan up on his website in the last 24 hours. He has no experience. He has never made any attempt to try to address crime during his entire career, except showing up for photo ops here in Philadelphia.
I will give you...
That's okay. He choppy, but this is how I expected him to sound the whole time, right? Where, yes, there's choppiness to it. It doesn't sound the best. But that's worlds better than that fracking conversation. That fracking conversation is brutal than some of the conversations he had previously, points that he had previously. You know, on the specifics of what he's saying here, my record as mayor of Braddock, gun violence went down. My opponent doesn't have any record of that. That is a message to say. I believe factually that's incorrect. I believe in Braddock that crime went up and then lowered once he was no longer mayor. I could be wrong, but that'll be incumbent on Dr. Oz, I guess, to bring up. But as far as just his answer in a box here, not the worst answer in the world.
15 seconds to respond to that, and then I have a question for you.
The Fraternal Order of Police from Braddock, the small town he represented, endorsed me. They supported me because what he's saying is not true. Violence skyrocketed in Braddock. I mean, the town wasn't in a good shape when John got there. It got worse when he was there. People kept leaving. So, of course, you're going to have all kinds of aberrations. But, John, the city was dangerous under your leadership, and that's why the FOP endorsed me.
Mr. Oz, this past summer.
I mean, that's a compelling answer. Without getting into the actual data, saying that actually the police in Braddock support me, that's pretty compelling. Again, one of the problems with this format of debate and sort of the presidential debates you see is it's very difficult to have the facts in front of you to be able to say, actually, crime decreased 17.3% my first year in office, and then, like, that's difficult. And so you sort of put it out there in layman terms so that the average person could understand. And then you rely on, after the debate, people sort of saying, look, here's the proof. This is what's occurring there. So I think both sides here do what they're supposed to, where he says, look, as mayor of Braddock, crime went down. Dr. Oz says, yes, that's not true. Crime went up. But the thing he does, I think, that wins this portion of the debate is saying, and if that's true, why did the police in your town support me? And obviously, Oz only has 15 seconds there. Hopefully, Oz gets a chance to go on the offense about Fetterman and Tom Wolf and how their administration has increased crime. That's one. Again, you always Monday morning quarterback these things, but the one thing I wish Oz was doing better is pointing out Fetterman is the lieutenant governor. Under his administration as lieutenant governor, crime is through the roof. Inflation's through the roof. Energy independence is declining massively. Don't let them, right? And then also liken him, he'll be another voice for Biden, where crime will go through the roof, where inflation will go through the roof. Those are the things that he needs to connect Fetterman to Wolf and to Biden, because they are massively unpopular. But I think he's doing okay.
Congress passed the first gun control bill in decades. That would not have happened without the support of the man you are running to replace, Pat Toomey. How would you have voted on that bill? And would you continue Toomey's legacy as being one of the lead Republicans in Congress on pushing for gun reforms? You have 60 seconds.
I have been supported by Pat Toomey. I've enjoyed working with him. I think he's done a wonderful job. There are parts of that bill that I like a lot. For example, I like the fact that there are background checks that are being strengthened now, so we can make sure that people who should not have guns don't get guns. I also like the fact that there was a lot of money invested for mental health, which is an important part of the equation. I've been to Philadelphia. I've done prayer vigils with black clergy leaders who are desperately trying to save the people in their community. Half the murders in Philadelphia are committed by people under 18. We have got to get mental health services to these people, and it's not happening now. But part of the problem is that we have taken away the ability of police to do their job, and that's on John Fetterman. Because John Fetterman has taken such a harsh position against them. He's undermined them at every level, taken away some of their funding. He's pushed for Krasner, who he admires tremendously, and he's spoken highly of him just this week. He's taken his policies to a new extreme. He's argued that people should be let out of jail without any bail, no matter what they did to get in there. He's argued to release 1/3 of all prisoners. 1/3 of all prisoners out of touch.
Quickly, 15 seconds.
He did not answer the question first, and I think the moderators are going to say that. But as far as the deflection, this is smart, right? Because this is the sort of things, right? Like these questions, like for example, the abortion question, the gun control question, these are all red herrings to what the people of Pennsylvania really want to hear. The focus, if you're Fetterman, if you're the Democrats, you want to focus on abortion. You want to focus on sort of that sort of like election denying January 6th, gun control. Those are things that you want to focus. So Oz is correct to bring it back to a sort of yes, I am talking through a candid string. My microphone got thrown out at my work office here, so I'm speaking through a headset. So he's right to say, but look, when we're talking about gun control, what we're really talking about is crime, mental health. He's right to do that. I think he could have answered better, if I'm going to be honest. He should directly answer the question. Would you have supported Toomey's bill? He could say there were parts of it I liked, but no, I wouldn't have voted for it. Or he could say there were parts of it I liked, parts I didn't like, but I still would have voted for it. But he has not answered the question. And if Fetterman was in any shape, he could correctly point that out. Now, I heard that the moderators are going to start, say, 15 seconds. Maybe they're going to hold his feet to the fire, which they should say. That's not really an answer to the question. He's right.
Would you have voted for that Pat Toomey supported bill?
I would have tried to improve that bill. There are things that I think most of us appreciate. I wasn't there at the time, so I can't speak to what was possible. But I do know there are parts of that bill that do make sense, and the ones I described should be followed. Let's see how it works out.
Okay, thank you. Lisa.
On to our next issue.
Not an answer I'm happy with. As far as a general election, maybe not the worst answer. But, again, these are the things you'll have to worry about if he is elected. Again, this is half the battle. And by the way, if you're a Fetterman fan, same is true here. I don't know how you could be at this point, but honestly, if you are, it's important to hold the people's feet to the fire when they're speaking to you. You're a progressive, I want your vote. Hold their feet to the fire once they're in office. So, that's my plan. A red wave is one thing. That's just the very beginning of the battle. Then it's making sure they do things that matter, like fighting corruption. When it comes to protection of the Second Amendment, I don't think Dr. Oz is going to be particularly strong on that issue, and I think that it's something that needs to be called out. But as far as saying things to appeal to an independent and moderate audience, there are some things I like about it, some things not. But let's be honest, that's a wishy-washy answer. Now, it's worlds better than what Fetterman sounds like, but...
And that is illegal immigration. It has been a problem in the United States for decades, but it is now spiking. U.S. Customs and Border Protection just released numbers from fiscal year 2022. They show more than 2.7 million total enforcement actions in the U.S. That is the most ever. Mr. Oz, beginning with you. Republican governors in the South have been sending migrants to Democratic-run cities and states without a plan or without any coordination. It is certainly gaining a lot of attention, but is it an effective way to deal with the influx of migrants? You have 60 seconds.
Lisa, we have a catastrophe at the border, and we should not have sanctuary cities as John Fetterman has tried to introduce. But I've been into the parts of Philadelphia and Allentown and Reading where we have large Latino populations. I understand the challenges of the border. My father was an immigrant. My mother were immigrants. I understand what legal immigration offers us, but the completely porous, open nature of our border, which John Fetterman supports, has created a humanitarian crisis with cartels profiting with human trafficking operations. They take the money, they buy narcotics from China and bring that into our country, and it's making every state a border state. Pennsylvania is already a border state because we're top 3 in the country in fentanyl overdoses. Lisa, I can't go anywhere where, and giving a big event where I don't meet multiple people who say their personal lives have been destroyed because of fentanyl overdoses. Yet John Fetterman not only wants an open border, not only supports sanctuary cities, but he wants to legalize all hard drugs in America, including narcotics. That is, I mean, out of touch with everybody. That radical position was tried in Oregon, which he endorsed, 50% homicide increase rate.
Oh. All right. So I would like to see a more aggressive answer. Do you support DeSantis sending people to Martha's Vineyard? Clearly, this is my answer to that. Clearly, that is something that's designed to purely show that the lies that are being told by radical left-wing people like those in sanctuary cities are designed to put the burden of illegal immigration onto border cities, places that don't have the resources to deal with them. And what that stunt does is show that even though they have more resources because they're wealthy communities, they actually know that there is a crisis and they refuse to do anything about it because the crisis is for them is out of sight, out of mind. Now, that's just a stunt. Here's how I would solve the actual border crisis. Here's the things that, that's a better answer to directly respond to the stunt. But what he does is fantastic there, where he talks about fentanyl overdoses in Pennsylvania, and he likens that to the border. Very smart, because everyone I know has been affected by a fentanyl overdose. So to kind of show how there's a connection between, or imply that there's a connection between illegal immigration and fentanyl overdoses, and to say that also, by the way, Fetterman is for being easy and soft on drugs, and he's for sanctuary cities, I think that that's a very good answer. Even though it didn't specifically address the stunt aspect of what DeSantis did, I'm using the word stunt. That's probably not the word I would think of, or not the word that if I had time to think that I would use, I would say strategy instead of stunt, because I fully support what DeSantis did, and I would send more and more illegals to Martha's Vineyard, to the neighborhoods of all of these politicians and wealthy sanctuary cities. I think that it is brilliant. Now, as far as the war on drugs, yeah, I'm for more of a libertarian take on a lot of drugs, but I've grown a little harder on it when it comes to drugs such as heroin, fentanyl, and things like that that lead to those mass overdoses. I think that the way we solve that is not necessarily through a war on drugs. It's more through punishing pharmaceutical companies and doctors that overprescribe these things, and sort of, controlling our border and the illegal trafficking of drugs and things like that. But as far as Dr. Oz speaking to a normie audience, like people, independent and moderate people that are voting, he's right to point out, fentanyl, you're sad, it's crushed you, it's crushed your loved ones. This guy's easy on the border where the fentanyl comes in. This guy's easy on the drugs. I think it's a compelling message.
One moment, I will give a 15-second rebuttal.
Yeah, that is, again, the Oz rule. That is just not true. Here, his family's company was levied the largest fine for immigration hiring of immigrant illegals, and I think you should sit this one out about in terms of what a secure border.
All right, we do have a follow-up specifically for you, Mr.
I mean, again, super choppy, could barely make out what he's saying. So bad. But his answer there is, Oz's family was fined for the hiring of illegal immigrants, so he shouldn't be able to say anything on it. If he's able, I don't know if that's true, but if he's able to articulate that in a way that's sensible, maybe it sounds all right, but it's just sad. It's just pathetic. Like, I'm surprised I was even able to translate what he was trying to say there. Fetterman's been worse than that most of the time. He's terrible. This is one of the saddest things I've ever seen. It is that bad. And again, the message from this debate, it isn't just how bad Fetterman's getting crushed. It's bad. It's one of the worst I've ever seen. To me, the more important thing to that is to watch how the media will gaslight you that he did pretty good. They'll try to ignore, they'll spend a day or two saying he did pretty good and Oz did really bad for XYZ, and then they'll move on from it. They'll just ignore that this debate occurred. Or they'll say that Oz is a bully for pointing out how bad Fetterman was.
Mr. Fetterman, Vice President Kamala Harris says the southern border is secure, yet we are seeing an unprecedented number of migrants crossing. Is the border secure? And if not, what would you do to fix what both parties are calling a crisis? You have 60 seconds, Mr. Fetterman.
I believe that a secure border can be compatible with compassion. I believe we need a comprehensive and bipartisan solution for immigration. That's what I believe. I don't ever recall in the Statue of Liberty did they say, take our tired, huddled masses and put them on a bus and use cheap political stunts about them. I believe we have to develop a comprehensive and bipartisan solution to address our issue here for immigration here in our nation.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Now, again, two things. One, it hardly matters. I would say this in a normal debate, and it would matter more to me perceptually, but Fetterman just perceptually looks so bad. This is totally secondary. But notice how the way you perceive these two is Oz is speaking up to the time that he's allowed to speak and slightly over it. And Fetterman is ending every time before he gets to his time limit. Perceptually, what that looks like, and Oz isn't going overboard. He's not like talking 30 seconds past the timer. But what it looks like is Oz is someone who has things to say and ideas, and he has, opinions on the questions being asked. And Fetterman just doesn't have much. It's like Fetterman's just like, I need to say what I need to say to run out the clock. But yet you hardly notice that because perceptually, other than that, Fetterman just looks abysmal. Because unfortunately, he's in a medical condition where he's in no condition to be a senator or to be on a stage. It's that sad. Someone said, haven't I seen him speaking recently? I have, but I thought that they would have had so much preparation and help from the computer here that he would have at least been able to articulately get out one or two lines on each topic. And unfortunately, that seems to be the exception and not the rule. It seems to be way worse. Or fortunately, if you don't want him elected like me. But it's sad. It's just really sad. On what he said there specifically, I did comment with Dr. Oz not answering the question specifically. He certainly did not answer the specific question, is the border secure? He did not answer that. The message that he's trying to go for there, that we could have a secure border that also involves compassion and that immigration is important because of the Statue of Liberty, that's not what I find a persuasive argument, but that is an argument that others might find persuasive. And that's sort of the direction that Democrats could most sensibly go. You have to admit the problem. Yeah, there is a problem at the border. We think that there are a litany of reasons because of COVID, because of climate change. I think that's garbage, but that's what you could say, right? But there's a way we could deal with that problem in a compassionate way. That's not a terrible answer. Now, he's not articulating that. These are just talking points that he has, and it's made even worse because he never answered whether or not the border is secure. We'll see if the moderators or if Dr. Oz bring that up.
And on to the
But
next
John's
issue.
not addressing the elephant in the room, fentanyl.
We have to move on to the next issue. We will be circling back on that.
Turning now to foreign policy. Mr. Fetterman, what do you believe is the greatest foreign threat to the United States of America? You have 60 seconds.
I believe is right now is China. I believe China is not our friend, and I believe that we can't be able to push back, and we need to stand against China. And I believe that Dr. Oz has chosen to manufacture all of his merchandise on his name on it in China. Which one of us on this stage is going to stand up against and stand firm against China? And I believe that's our single biggest issue right now, to make sure that we address China and make sure that we know that it's not our friend.
Mr. Oz, what?
Again, he didn't use the whole 60 seconds, which again, that's okay once in a while if you have a very concise answer, but he's never using it because he's having a lot of difficulty. He just has boilerplate phrases. That's all he has. I don't believe him. I don't believe that the Democrats will do well on China. But that's neither here nor there when it comes to analyzing this debate. As an answer, I'm kind of impressed with that answer. I thought he would have said Russia. When I personally think China is a bigger threat. He then attacks Dr. Oz, saying Dr. Oz manufactured things in China. That's not unreasonable. That's a fair point. That is a way to go on offense on the issue. Now, it doesn't anywhere come remotely close to saying, that China's our biggest threat, here's what I would do. He just keeps saying, it's China, China's not our friend, Dr. Oz manufactured things in China. It's not really a concise answer. But again, going by the standards of what we've seen Fetterman do in this debate, not bad based on the horrible low standard that we've seen.
What do you believe is the greatest foreign threat to the United States of America? You have 60 seconds.
The fact that our country is not projecting strength. Take, for example, what we're doing with Iran. In order to try to get them to give us a little oil so we can deal with the catastrophe that Russia has caused, we have gone to them and tried to sign a deal that would allow them once again to have the nuclear power to blow up Israel, which they promised they would do. John Fetterman supports that deal. It doesn't make any sense for America to treat our enemies better than our allies. We have to message with our strong voice and the energy we have in our country that we have control over our future. And the best way for America to establish its dominance is to unleash the energy here in Pennsylvania and across the country. By not doing that, not only do we cause all kinds of problems with local jobs and inflation, but we're destroying our ability to remain energy dominant, and we're not able to become allies like we should be for countries like European nations, which are going to struggle with their coldest winter ever. It's the best way to punch Putin back and to teach China a lesson is American energy to reign supreme. And John Fetterman doesn't like American energy, and they are scared of him because they know they can't trust him. He's proven it.
Mr. Rod?
That's actually a very good answer, right? Now, he gave an answer, it's sort of cliche, right? So he didn't give a specific country. This is the biggest threat. In fact, he spent most of the time talking about Iran, which obviously I think China is a bigger threat than Iran, but I get it. But the answer he gives about projection, it's like, okay, where are you going with this? Like, if you're talking about like being the world police, totally disagree. But when he says what we need to do is become energy independent, that is exactly the way you deal with foreign policy. That is exactly. Now, that might be a goal if we're talking realistically that we're a decade away from. But what you do is you unleash energy in the United States and then sell that energy to our allies. And then these countries like China and Russia and the OPEC countries that we don't like, we're no longer reliant on them. And we're in a position to deal with them in a non-militaristic way. Because now we have soft power that we're able to project. We're able to project our economic power. We're able to project, helping allies out while also increasing the livelihood of people in the United States by making energy cheaper and by making jobs. That is a good answer. And you know that this is in line with things that I've been saying, such as one of the major problems I have with the situation with Ukraine and Russia is that the United States and NATO have constantly aggressed or provoked Russia over the past 5, 6, 7 years. They've been provoked, while at the same time remaining dependent on Russia for energy, at least the European NATO countries. And so that's actually an excellent answer that, look, we can't project power, and we were going to be in a worse position internationally with foreign policy if we are reliant on the very places that we are saying are our enemies. So Fetterman thinks that China is a problem. The best way to deal with China is to become energy independent so we don't have to rely on China's allies and other countries we don't like Iran, Russia, for energy. We got another troll saying that I'm a Russian apologist. And again, thank you for coming into the chat, Neocon. We know war, drop nuclear bombs on Russia. We get it. What's your last name again? Are you a Cheney or are you a Rumsfeld? I don't know. But I bet that this Baldwin guy, what's his name? Baldwin Orange. I'll bet Baldwin Orange popped some champagne when the Biden administration bombed those ISIS-K people that were kids in Afghanistan. I bet he popped the champagne. Oh, boring! More money for Raytheon! Yay! Killing little kids! Woo! Let's go hang out with the Bushes and the Rumsfelds. No, I'm not a Russian apologist. I've talked over and over how I find what Russia's doing is heinous, and that they're more at fault, and I hope that Ukraine wins that conflict. I just think that the United States provoked Russia, which predictably led to them doing something incredibly heinous, and we continue to use it as a money laundering scheme. The Ukraine government's not much better than Russia, though they're not the ones that invaded, so I'm rooting for them. And more than anything, what I want is a peaceful resolution. But even if you hated Russia, the best way to deal with them in this situation would be to not have to rely on them. You didn't touch a nerve with me. I just like pointing out, you neocons. I'm not saying you're a troll, I'm saying you're a neocon. I'm saying that you like when brown people are bombed in other countries. You get off on that. That's what I'm saying, Baldwin Orange. Don't get it twisted. So, let's keep going.
Thank you. Lisa.
All right, on to our next issue. In our recent Nexstar poll, a hypothetical rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in 2024 would be a statistical tie in Pennsylvania. 46% of people said they would vote for former President Trump, 45% for President Biden. Mr. Oz, would you support a Trump 2024 run, and why 60 seconds?
I'll support whoever the Republican Party puts up. And I have reached out across the aisle on my campaign because I want to bring balance to Washington. And I've tried to work with Democrats and Republicans and people in the middle, people unsure, and people who forgot, and people who got angry with where their party was headed. I want to bring us together to make this country do what it's always been able to do. Unify, not divide, and address the problems as a surgeon, because in the OR, that's what I do. I just fix the big problem in front of me. John Fetterman, however, cannot go to Washington and work with the other side because he doesn't even get along with his own side. He criticized Joe Biden for not spending enough money and not sidling up close enough to Bernie Sanders. He says he won't work with Joe Manchin. He said, if you like Joe Manchin, don't vote for me. So if you're picking fights with your own party, you're not going to be able to reach across the aisle to the other side. His extreme positions have made him untenable for Republican lawmakers. We need to send someone to Washington who understands the importance of balance, sensible decision-making, and a common sense approach to the challenges that we all face. That's not John Fetterman.
Mr. Oz.
First question where I haven't seen Oz use the full amount of time, just to point that out to be consistent. I personally don't like that answer. I understand the utility of that answer going into a general election. Oz does not want to make this election about Donald Trump. Oz wants to make this election about Joe Biden, Tom Wolf, and John Fetterman. So the more Trump talk that's being talked, all you do is risk alienating someone that might be watching this debate going, wow, I can't vote for Fetterman, he's terrible. But maybe they despise Donald Trump and they think, well, Dr. Oz is friends with Donald Trump, so I'm not going to vote for him. So strategically, I understand why he would say that. But again, this is what I truly believe. I truly believe that Oz would be another rhino that would stab someone like Trump in the back. I truly believe that. He'll be better than Fetterman. I'll vote for Dr. Oz, but I heavily campaigned against him in the primary. And I'll hold his feet to the fire once he's elected. You know, so I think a better answer there that could have rode that fine line is, of course, I support Trump. I think Trump would be superior to Joe Biden. But if the Republicans decide to nominate someone else, I also would support them. I think that would have been a slightly better answer then. But, you know, I understand the utility of not wanting to even mention Trump's name if you're Dr. Oz. Just saying I would have went about it a little different. I don't think it would have harmed him.
Donald Trump has supported you. He has endorsed you. Why won't you fully commit to supporting him in 2024?
Oh, I do. I would support Donald Trump if he decided to run for president.
All right.
But this is bigger than one candidate. This is a much bigger story about how we are going to build a bigger tent to let more Americans feel safe.
Are you concerned about
that? That is an excellent. Okay, you can tell I haven't watched this. I'm watching it with you in real time. So yeah, that's actually an excellent follow-up. Of course, I would support him, but it's bigger than one candidate. Excellent message. So yeah, that's. Thank you, by the way, Elmo, for the subscription. I actually think that follow-up was very good. Moderators continue to be very good.
About the ongoing legal investigations involving the former president. 30 seconds, sir.
I haven't followed them very carefully. I've been campaigning pretty aggressively. They'll work themselves out. I have tremendous confidence in the American legal system, and I believe law and order will reign supreme. But speaking about that topic, there's one person on this stage who's broken the law, we believe. John Fetterman took a shotgun, chased an unarmed African-American man, and put the gun, apparently, according to that man, to his chest. John, you weren't pulled over by the police. They let you go. You were the mayor at the time. Why haven't you apologized to that unarmed, innocent black man who you put a shotgun to his chest?
All right, we will allow 30.
That's very clever. A seamless transition there. First off, on the Mar-a-Lago stuff, again, I want someone that'll fight corruption. If I'm running, I'm going to make no bones about it. I'm disbanding the FBI. If I'm running for Senate, that's part of my big issue. Right now, though, that's not who Dr. Oz is, first. And second, right now, 2 weeks outside the election, that's not a message necessarily that Pennsylvanians are focused on. They're focused on the economy, they're focused on crime, immigration, indoctrination of children, illegal or open borders. That's what they're focused on. So Oz's answer there is clever, where he's like, oh, I haven't followed it, I'm very busy, I'm assuming justice will prevail. And then to turn it against Fetterman is actually very brilliant. It's a very brilliant debate tactic. Excellent. So let's see what Fetterman says. It's very smart. And again, I can't speak highly enough of these moderators. Imagine that if we had moderators like this in the presidential debates. They're reining it. They've reined in Oz when he's gone over. When they felt that they needed to ask follow-ups, they have. I'm very impressed. You know, I can't speak highly of it. It's very difficult to be a moderator. The ones we saw in the presidential elections and things like that are so grotesquely biased, like Chris Wallace, it's pathetic. But this is being done very professionally. I would watch these two moderate any debate. I think that it's been a high point of this.
30-second response to that, Mr. Fetterman, specifically what he was saying, referring to the incident in Braddock.
I made the opportunity to defend our community as the chief law enforcement officer there. Everybody in Braddock, an overwhelmingly majority community of black community, all understood what happened. You know, they understood what happened, and everybody agreed that, and nobody believes that it was anything about me making a split-second decision to defend our community as well.
Why not apologize?
Mr. Oz, please. We are still with Mr. Fetterman. Turning to you right now.
A good little right. Like, I don't really think that that's a terrible answer from Fetterman. I think that it's like, look, I made a snap decision. It was a mistake. I truly believe, like, listen, let me be straight up with you. I don't think that incident shows that John Fetterman's a racist. I think that it shows he's a hypocrite. He would want to take your right to defend yourself away. But I don't think this proves that he's a racist. I think he probably did think that he heard gunshots. He did see someone running, and he pulled a gun on them. That is bad decision-making, right? But I don't think that it proves he's a racist. I think that it's a fair grounds to attack him on, given what radical leftists want to accuse you of being racist anytime they get a chance. And it's fair given that they want to, you know, say that there's systemic racism within policing and things like that. But just being honest with you, I don't know that this proves he's a racist. But Oz is correct. The point is then, why not directly apologize to that guy? And he never really has. He's been mealy-mouthed about it. He's made excuses for why he did what he did, which I find the excuses to be somewhat credible. But he never said, I'm deeply sorry to that man. For him, I understand the trauma of having a gun pointed at you when you didn't have anything wrong. That's terrible. I'm so sorry for that man. I didn't do it because his skin color. I didn't do it because I'm someone that's quick to anger. I did it because I thought that there was violence. And I'm deeply sorry if that affected that man. And I just want to let him know that it wasn't a decision made of malice towards him, but I do deeply regret that happened. How hard is it to say that? And if I, you know, there's never really been a just flat-out apology issue. But anyways, moving on.
You support a Biden run. Do you support a Biden run in 2024? Why in 60 seconds?
That's obviously, it's up to his choice whether he, you know, and if he does choose to run, I would absolutely support him. But ultimately, that's ultimately only his choice.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fetterman. A follow-up question on this.
I mean, I'm not going to knock him for a short answer there. I think that's smart, actually. I think that if he should distance himself from Biden, I think he has to say, as a Democrat, of course, if he runs, I would defend him. But I don't think he wants to go on a lengthy speech about how great a job Biden did. So this is one answer that I actually think that he's smart to just be like, of course, it's his choice. If he runs, I'll support him. I think that that's as good of an answer as you could have to that question for him. So no complaints there.
Our Next Star poll shows 51% of Pennsylvania voters disapprove of the president's job performance. You have publicly supported many of his policy positions. Are there any that you disagree with? 30 seconds.
Oh, my God.
No, I just believe he needs to do more about supporting and fighting about inflation. And I do believe he can do more about that. But at the end of the day, I think Joe Biden is a good family man, and I believe he stands for the union way of life. And I believe that unemployment is already down to the lowest level in the last 50 years.
All right. Thank you, Joe.
Wait. First off, again, part of the pausing is because he's reading, right? But the reading, you know what I mean? So I do give a little leeway from that because he can't understand the spoken word, which again, I can't believe I'm saying this. A candidate for Senate can't understand spoken words, right? But that's brutal, that pause at the beginning. But I'm giving a little leeway because he's reading, okay? But still, that pause is he's like, you can see he doesn't have like rapid thinking skills. Like he just doesn't. It's just not there. He's medically not there. You know? And, you know, his answer where he's like, I wish you would do more about inflation. Like what? Like, he just like, well, I don't like inflation. But that's not a policy that Biden's done. So it's not really an answer. But I want to hear this part. He says he's a good family man. Okay.
No, I just believe he needs to do more about supporting and fighting about inflation. And I do believe he can do more about that. But at the end of the day, I think Joe Biden is a good family man, and I believe he stands for the union way of life.
Okay, he stands for the union way of life. Okay, I didn't quite catch the first time what he said there. So, you know, at the end of it saying, I think he's a good family man, he stands for unions, and unemployment's good, I don't mind him praising him a little. That's not horrible stuff. But again, not a good answer, not a good look, that massive pause. He doesn't give an answer of any of the policies that he just like, I wish he would fight inflation more. It's just perceptually, it's so bad.
I believe that unemployment is already down to the lowest level in the last 50 years.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Dennis.
Let's turn now, gentlemen, to the issue of Social Security. It is only fully funded through 2030.
If you all would give me just a moment, I'm going to go to the restroom real quick. I promise I'll be right back. Okay, back here. All right, let's keep moving.
4, many Americans are worried that they will never receive their full benefit or have to accept cuts to their benefits. Mr. Fetterman, how are you going to make sure it is there for them? You have 60 seconds.
We need to make sure that Dr. Oz and the Republicans believe in cutting Medicare and Social Security. And I believe that they have to support and expand Social Security. And if somebody send me to Washington, D.C., I would support and stand and to support security, Social Security.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oz. Same question to you.
I mean, honestly, just that answer there. It's not just the choppiness of it. Like, that is so bad. It's like, and there's so many Democrats. What's the woman's name that's running against Carrie Lake? Hobbs? She's like that. When she talks, it's just like she doesn't think Kamala Harris. Well, the thing about security is we're in insecure times that require security. And your family's security is something that secures your needs. Yeah, Katie, they all talk like this. I mean, granted, Fetterman's had a stroke, so he sounds even worse than them. But it's like, what did he say there? How would you ensure that Medicare and Social Security aren't cut into? And he's like, I think that they're good, and if you send me, I'll keep thinking they're good, and I'll say keep them. I don't know that the moderators are saving him. It's not. He stops talking, and they're like, okay, moving on. What do you want? I mean, they're not going to be like, that's a non-answer. They're just like, okay. It's not the moderator's job to tell us as an audience. Once in a while, they can interject and say, excuse me, Oz, that didn't answer the specific question. Excuse me, Fetterman, that didn't answer the specific question. But at this point, it's like, what are they supposed to do? Just like, they don't have to say a word. Everyone who's watching who remotely sees is like, this guy's blowing it. Well, I don't mind them saving them being interrupted by Oz. That's okay. I think this is as good of a moderating job as I've seen, honestly. They've let a little back and forth go in the chippiness, but I think it's been pretty fair. But let's keep going. Oh man, this is bad.
You're going to make sure that Social Security is available for future Americans. You have 60 seconds.
We made a deal with the wonderful seniors of our nation. They worked their hearts out. They paid into a program. No one's going to touch it on my watch except to make sure that it's stronger than it is right now. Social Security, Medicare, which I know a lot about as a doctor, are the fundamental element of security for our seniors, and they deserve to feel like they're valued by our nation. John Fetterman, again, has been running ads and saying that I'm against those with no proof. I've never said anything different than what I'm saying to you on this stage. But in an effort to fearmonger with people who are older and can be taken advantage of, he'll run these ads. John, it's reprehensible, but it's also reflective of your approach to doing these things. You haven't shown up on the campaign trail. You haven't answered questions from voters, not once on the campaign trail. You haven't answered questions from media once on the campaign trail, even just to show off that you could do it. And this is the only debate I could get you to come to talk to me on. And I had to beg on my knees to get you to come. And if it wasn't for Dennis probably getting involved, I don't think it would have happened. Seniors need to know more about your radical left positions, and I need to be able to tell them about my positions. That's what democracy is built on. We exchange ideas, the voters decide. You have hidden from them.
Mr. Oz, I'm going to let you have...
That's not a bad answer. Now, again, it's cheap in that he didn't say how he would protect. He just says, I would protect. Now, the nature of the question lends to that, because the reason this is a topic is because it's an issue that Fetterman has accused Dr. Oz, and the Democrats are accusing Republicans all across the country of this. They'll cut into your Medicare. They'll cut into your Social Security. So it's sort of a wash, both sides saying, no, we'll respect it, we'll keep it. I don't think either side gives you a good reason as to how they will. But this is a position that Fetterman needs to go on the offense. I respect Social Security. This is exactly what Oz has said as to how he'll cut into it. But again, he doesn't have the mental capacity or the linguistic ability to do that. So I actually like Oz's answer, where this is something where this is a position that he's going to be on defense on. And what you could do is answer the question and then go to an area that you think is an offensive area for you that hasn't been addressed. And Oz does a good job of this, where he makes it about democracy and says people have the right. He seamlessly transitions to, I support Medicare, I support Social Security. My opponent is wrong in saying that I don't. He has lied to seniors, and seniors deserve to hear more from us, and you've been hiding on the trail. That's a very seamless transition to get from a question to Medicare to an offensive point of, why aren't you campaigning? Why aren't you answering questions? And when people were saying earlier, well, Dr. Oz needs to say, look, this guy can't speak. I think there are ways to do that, but this is an effective way to get around that, which is to just say, look, he's not out there. And it's implicit why. Like, everybody watching knows why he's not out there. And so he makes it this point about democracy. He says, we are supposed to put our positions out there and talk to the people. That's what I'm doing. What are you doing? I think that's a very persuasive way to say that. I'm actually very impressed.
I have 15 seconds in a moment, Mr. Fetterman, but can you give us a specific example of what you would do to protect Social Security?
Well, for one, we have to make sure that it adequately increases with the higher inflation rates that we have. So we've got to make that 4% of wasted money that right now is in the budget redirected appropriately. And one of the first places that I would use it is Social Security and Medicare. And here's the reason. One of the worst things we can do to a people is give them bad quality care. And so if you have people who are not going to see a doctor, for example, because they can't afford it, they'll get sicker. Bad medicine means more cost.
Now, I will say this is the moderators didn't ask Fetterman, can you give us a specific example of how you would increase Medicare or Social Security? They did ask Oz. Oz does a decent job answering here. But thank you. I'm glad you like the analysis. This is a decent answer. There is a possible attack here to be leveled by Fetterman. If I'm a Democrat and I hear Oz say that, I would say, well, then clearly you support our Medicare for all positions. That's what I would say if I'm Fetterman here, right? If Oz is going to talk about the need to provide health care for people, that's the direction I would take this. I would say, I agree. Then why don't you support our plans of Medicare for all? We'll see if Fetterman says it.
No one benefits.
Thank you. Mr. Fetterman, he said a few things a moment ago. I want to give you 15 seconds to respond to those.
Now, again, I can't just say one thing other than that Dr. Oz would not support, and he would support cutting Medicare. And that's
John. Why do you say that? I've never said that.
It's absolutely
brutal by these moderators. By the way, does anyone else get what was just brutal that the moderator did there? Oh my God, this is so hard to watch. The moderator didn't restate what Oz said. So now poor Fetterman, who could barely follow what's going on, like, oh, do you want to respond? And he's just like, yeah, Medicare. Oh, man. Like, oh, no, the point that Oz was asking that they wanted you to respond to was that you haven't been showing up, that you didn't want to do more debates. Oh, my goodness. It's so bad. So now he says, hey, thanks for the sub, Nightmarish. He says, no, I'm just saying he's against Medicare. Now, Oz is doing something here. This is difficult. Oz is crushing this debate. So it's skeptic. Do you want to throw the Hail Mary if you're already winning? I don't know. But what Oz is doing here, he knows that the only chance that Fetterman has to not look like even more of a buffoon is to not have direct back and forth with Oz. It has to be through the moderator. That's the only way. If there is an actual conversation between these two occurring, he's in a lot of trouble. And so Oz smells blood in the water here, and he's like, why are you saying that? Give me an example. And Fetterman, he can't answer. He can't. So I don't mind Oz doing this here. I think he has to be judicious with what he's about to do here. But there's blood in the water, and Fetterman is not capable of directly answering Oz here. Thank you, Khalil. I appreciate it.
Absolutely a fact. It's a fact. You would have voted against the Inflation Reduction Act, which has dropped our prescription drugs, and he doesn't believe.
Okay, gentlemen, we need to move on. Lisa.
All right, we are moving on to the.
I mean, again, Inflation Reduction Act. It's really a non sequitur. At least that's an answer, But the Inflation Reduction Act did not help with Medicare and Medicaid, and Oz basically already answered that. He said, which was clever. Oz said, basically, if we're going to spend a bunch of money, the first place we should be spending it's on our seniors for health care. So he already sort of says, we're already spending a lot of money, but it's been misapplied. So, if Oz gets a chance to respond here, what he probably says is, yeah, I would have voted against the Inflation Reduction Act because it massively blew out the budget, caused inflation, and it was directed in places where fraud occurred and directed at places that weren't going to help seniors with Medicaid and Social Security.
The topic of education. The cost of college tuition is now out of reach for many, many families. Our question is for both of you. We start with Mr. Oz. What is your plan to bring down the cost of higher education long term? You have 1 minute, Mr. Oz.
I've worked in academic medical centers my whole life, so I'm in higher education. And I can tell you the reason that the prices have gone up sixfold in the last 40 years is not because the education quality is better. We've added extra layers of middle level individuals who don't actually improve the quality education, in my opinion. There's a lot of expenses now incurred by these institutions, and it's not right for the American people to be stuck with the bill. I would push them to offer more electronic classes. Half the kids don't live on campus anyway. John Fetterman's approach, however, is not to deal with the unnecessarily high costs, but just to pay it. So if you want to pay students who didn't pay their loans back, basically what John Fetterman and Joe Biden are arguing for is for plumbers who didn't go to college and couldn't, for a bunch of reasons, afford it, to pay the bills of lawyers who went to graduate school and haven't paid their debt back. I don't think that's right for the American people. We want a fair system. Drop the cost down by pushing for more value for the money we're spending, and then ensure there's a high-quality education that lets people make a living when they graduate.
All right, I will allow a 15-second rebuttal.
It's not a bad answer. Again, it's sort of milquetoast. Again, Dr. Oz is more of a middle-of-the-road Republican. That's why I didn't vote for him in the primary. But that's who he is. I think he's more of an establishment Republican. I'll have a lot negative to say to him about him when he's elected, probably. But from that angle, that's the correct answer, right? The problem is the government getting involved. The problem is hiring all these new administrators that aren't teaching. The quality of education is going down, and we shouldn't make plumbers pay for lawyers' tuition. That's all good. I would go further. I would say that these schools are rabid indoctrination chambers, and that's why the quality of education is going down. They are greedy. the Democrats and Fetterman want to talk about greedy gas stations that are owned by mom and pops, but they have no problem with greedy universities like Harvard with billion-dollar endowments. They're the ones that are greedy, that are charging more and more, getting more and more money for a product that is worth less and less, that is teaching our students to hate this country and pumping out degrees that aren't beneficial to our country whatsoever. That's sort of the answer that I would have went more with. But not bad there from Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz Rhino AOC, probably, I don't think he's hitting the same like young demographic as AOC, but you're probably closer to right than not.
Specifically on the issue of student loan debt, which Mr. Oz was referring to. Mr. Fetterman.
Again, Dr. Oz, loves free money when it's a $500,000 tax break on one of his, homes down in a ranch in Florida, and whether it was a $50 tax break, about his farm in Montgomery County. So it's about supporting and helping, young earners, young students to give them a break. I believe that supporting.
All right, let me just ask.
Oh my God, it's so bad! It's so bad! Oh my God, he just sounds so bad. So the strategy that Fetterman's doing on some of these topics isn't the worst strategy, right? And that is, instead of talking specifics on such as a policy, to point out hypocrisy or things that your opponent's done that you think is counterintuitive to the message that you want to get across. That's not a bad strategy. The problem is you need to be able to articulate that. So, for example, if I'm just watching, let's say that, I work a 9-to-5 job, I don't really follow politics, but I am going to go vote, and so I tune into this debate, and I'm like, let's see what they have to say. I'm not going to know what he means when he says, free money, $50 farm, and $500,000 your house. Like, what does that mean? Hey, what's up, lecture fan? Thanks so much for the raid. We are watching what quite possibly might be the worst debate performance I've ever seen. It's to the point where I actually feel terrible that this man's family and friends didn't step in and tell him that this needs to end. It is despicable. To lecture fans audience, I will say this. I'm sure that you guys have talked about this debate. I'm sure I haven't been following social media. I've been covering this debate since 8 o'clock, so I don't know what people are saying out there. I think the thing to watch is this. It's not just about how bad Fetterman's shape is and how he's got blown out of the water. What's important to watch is how we are going to be gaslit by the Democrats and the media and the blue checkmarks on Twitter about how Fetterman did pretty good. This is a clarifying situation to see how much these institutions lie to you. Anyone with any remote objectivity would watch this and say, my God, this is a massacre. But they're going to be telling you what they'll try to do. They'll go with the quick hit. Fetterman didn't sound that bad. We shouldn't make fun of him for having a medical condition. That's step one. Well, step one is he didn't sound that bad. Step two is the insults against him are his medical condition. Step three will be find something they don't like about Dr. Oz and say what he did about how he was bad. And then step four will be to pretend like this debate didn't happen. Within 3 days, they won't be talking about this debate. But just learn to pick up on how despicable and gaslighting these institutions are. That when something as blatant as this, is how bad John Fetterman is here, that they're going to try to tell you it wasn't that bad. So that's what I think is out there to watch. I have a radio voice, thank you. I also have a face for radio. Oh, dad jokes. So we're towards the end of this debate. I believe we're entering the final fourth of it. The topic that they just talked about was sort of college tuition. And, Oz makes the charge that, listen, plumbers shouldn't have to pay for the tuition of lawyers. And that's what Fetterman would want to have happen. And I was explaining Fetterman's response tactically isn't a bad idea. And that is, sometimes what you want to do is point out how the actions that your opponent has taken are hypocritical or mean that their answer is counterintuitive or something to that effect. And so Fetterman's trying to make this point. Let me make Fetterman's point for him. So this is Dr. Oz. I'll try to do I'll do a deeper voice for Dr. Oz, I guess. Plumbers shouldn't have to pay tuition for Ivy League lawyers, and we're spending too much on tuition. It shouldn't be up to the average person to pay for these things. This would be the response. Now I'll act as if I'm Fetterman. I would say, well, it's funny, when it comes to paying young people's tuition so that they can learn skills to better themselves in this country, all of a sudden, Dr. Oz doesn't like that and says that that's charity and that we shouldn't be doing that. But when it came to getting tax breaks himself and getting $500,000 for his mansion, you know, like his fifth or sixth one or whatever, because apparently 4 or 5 weren't enough, or for his fake land that he owns just so he could run here in Pennsylvania because he's really from New Jersey, the tax breaks he got on those breaks for him as a millionaire, perfectly fine. But hey, you out there that busted your hump trying to get an education degree so that we could educate the future generation, sorry, Dr. Oz says the welfare is for him and his rich buddies, and not for you and the poor working class. Yeah, I know I can't flow when I do Fetterman. That's the point. The only way that this sort of tactic is doable is if you're articulate. The problem is the way Fetterman, because of his health position, and maybe he just wasn't a good speaker before his stroke, but in the condition he's in tonight, listen to what he says. And now try to listen to what he says and imagine that you're someone who doesn't know much about Dr. Oz or Fetterman, right? This is your first time hearing from them. What would you make of what Fetterman's saying here?
Ensure there's a high-quality education that lets people make a living when they graduate.
All right, I will allow a 15-second rebuttal specifically on the issue of student loan debt, which Mr. Oz was referring to. Mr. Fetterman.
Again, Dr. Oz, loves free money when it's a $500,000 tax break on one of his, homes down in a ranch in Florida, and whether it was a $50 tax break, about his farm in Montgomery County. So it's about supporting and helping, young earners, students to give them a break. I believe that supporting.
All right, let me just ask.
It's just not articulate. And if you're just listening, you're like, what's this? Oz got a tax break? What, young earners? What? Like, it's bad. It's just bad. Now, the way I spun it, how I would have said it, if you're watching me for the first time saying, Dr. Oz doesn't care. He calls everything a gift when it's poor people, when it's a poor student getting money from the government, designed to help them in future generations. But when it's him getting gifts from the government, oh boy, he doesn't explain it that way, though. And so it just comes off as meandering, confusing. Ah, there we go. Brad says the gaslighting's already happening. Paul DeGala from CNN says that Dr. Oz lost the debate. Yeah, well, there you go. So it's bad. It's just so bad. His answers here are so bad. Let's keep going.
Specifically, with the plan to ease student loan debt, the debt forgiveness of $10,000, $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients. Do you support that position?
I do absolutely support that. I believe, like I said, it's about helping young learners, be able to get a better start, getting off in the start of their life. And I do believe that, and I believe a majority of Americans support that as well too, helping young learners.
All right, Mr. Fetterman.
Now again, if you've watched my I know my sound quality sucks. I'm not at home. I'm not at my home studio. If you're watching me for the first time, normally you get to see my beautiful face, and I have a decent mic. So I apologize for that. So if you go back and you watch the whole 2 hours that I've been streaming, there's been some bumps in the road quality-wise. But you can see one of the things I'm trying to do is I try to give the devil its due. And when Fetterman has I think Fetterman, it's one of the worst debate performances I've ever seen. But when he says something that I think is acceptable or a strong point for him, I do like to point that out. I have my biases. I don't particularly like Oz. I definitely want Oz to win. I think Fetterman's terrible even without the stroke. With the stroke, it's unforgivable. He shouldn't even be in the conversation. Having said that, this was a question that I think he handled decently. He had 15 seconds, so by nature of the question, he's not going to get into a lot of details. They asked him a simple yes/no question. Do you support giving $10,000 to loan forgiveness? He says, I do. I support it. I think that it's important to help young people out. That's one of his better answers that he's given. Not much room for error, no surprises there. I think he's been pretty vocal about supporting that, and it's a progressive policy to forgive those loans, but he sounded okay there. So.
And I want to ask you the same question that I asked Mr. Oz, and what is your plan to bring down the cost of higher education long term? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I don't think he didn't answer the question whatsoever.
I did answer the question.
I believe,
Mr. Oz, please give him a moment.
You didn't. I fundamentally believe that every quality public university education should be very affordable in every state, and I think that needs to be a significant investment, to make sure that anyone be able to afford to go to get a 4-degree university degree, at Penn State or at Pitt or any state schools, to make it much more affordable. And that means requiring a significant investment to make sure and create it affordable that every family can afford.
Okay, so now I want to be clear here. Again, I have to be clear. This is one of the worst. It's not that Oz is incredible. I think Oz has done better than I expected on many issues. But that's not the story. The story is just how abysmally bad John Fetterman's medical issues are, and just how perceptually terrible he looks. That's the real story. So please don't get confused when that's the real takeaway here. But I do want to be clear that a criticism about the level at Fetterman, I could also lever at Oz, which is they are very shallow on specifics on many of these things, right? So they'll say, Dr. Oz, what would you do to lower cost? And he says, I don't think plumbers should have to pay, but, and there's too many administrators. But he didn't really give an answer of what he would do. The same is true of here, except even worse, of Fetterman, right? The question was, how would you lower costs? And Fetterman just repeats the question like 4 times, and that's his answer. How would you lower costs for students? I think it's important to lower costs for students because students, pay costs, and we need to lower them. So we need to invest to make sure the costs for students are lower. That's not remotely an answer. And again, I'm not saying Oz hasn't done similar things, but it's far less noticeable because Oz, because he's more articulate, he's able to sort of give a vague answer that even though it's vague, it's usually much more specific than Fetterman's given, and then he's able to transition in, and this is why my opponent would be worse for it. Fetterman doesn't have that capability. So he just is restating like one boilerplate talking point over and over on each question. What about crime? When I was in Braddock, crime went down. I think crime should go down. It's important to work like in Braddock. What about inflation? Inflation's bad. We need to do things about inflation, and I wish that we would invest more in this corporate greed inflation. Like, that's every single topic, except he's nowhere near, even me repeating kind of what he said is far more articulate than what he's done.
Exactly, Mr. Fetterman, do you propose doing that to make it more affordable for families?
No, I just making it that much more, it costs too much, and I believe providing the resources to reduce the tuition to allow families to be able to afford it.
All right.
Again, this is another instance. I think these moderators are doing a fantastic job. By the way, when they correctly cut Oz off there, Fetterman said Oz didn't answer and Oz started to speak over him. That was the right thing to do. Sometimes you have to feel out as a moderator, and I've done this. I judged debates for years in college. Those styles of debates are different than this style of debate, obviously. But in this style of debate, you kind of have to have a feel for how things are going. It's like being a ref in a football game. Sometimes you leave the receiver and the cornerbacks hand check each other a little. Other times you're calling everything. Because of the nature of how this debate's gone, 4/5 of the way through it, there hasn't been a lot of people talking over it. They're absolutely right to say, Oz, no, it's his time to speak. Let him speak. Like, that's fair. That was a very fair moderation point there. But they've been good at sometimes asking follow-ups when they don't feel that their direct question's been answered, and this is another good job. And it's clear, Fetterman's just if he was more articulate, this is what Fetterman's really trying to say. What do you want to say? I don't have an answer. What do you want me to say? I'm just going to repeat, right? Like, listen to, when they ask again, listen, he's basically like, I just told you. Right, and they're telling you that what you just told them wasn't an answer.
That to make it more affordable for families.
No, I just making it that much more, it costs too much, and I believe providing the resources to reduce the tuition to allow families to be able to afford it.
All right, we have...
So it's a non-answer. And now I'm not in a submarine. My microphone got thrown away, and I'm not at my home office, so I'm on a headset microphone. Listen, I am the best conservative populist streamer out there, and so it would be unfair if I also had the best technology and devices and such. So. All right, let's keep going.
I have a follow-up question. This one now is for both of you. This is from News Nation viewer Ann Andrews, a registered nurse from Conneautville near Erie. Ann is a vocational educational instructor for a university and a practicing registered nurse.
If you were elected, could you please tell me what you would be doing for vocational education in the state of Pennsylvania as well as our nation?
So, Mr. Oz, if elected, what would you do for vocational education? You have 30 seconds.
I've visited vocational schools. I have an answer, but John, because obviously I wasn't clear enough for you to understand this, there's no question that cutting out the middle levels of higher education and providing digital programs would reduce the cost of education. It's a concrete set of ideas that I'd like to move on. With regard to vocational education, this is really important for us to allow our trade unions to get more closely linked with the vocational schools. I was in a vocational school in Westmoreland, and they have about 1,000 kids. They could take 2,000 kids. Funding those programs is the smartest way to invest our tax dollars. We'll turn out twice as many children who have a job as soon as they graduate. It supports our trade unions who want those kids in their positions anyway. It makes the whole program work.
Thank you.
Not a bad answer. So he goes back to the previous answer, gives an answer. It's still not heavy on specifics. Well, how exactly would you fund them? Where does this money come from, etc. But not a bad answer. Talking about the importance of, we could double how many people are in these facilities through government monies. These are jobs that they would have as soon as they're out of there. That's not a bad answer. He only has 30 seconds, so you can't blame him from making the next point, which these dollars are often far better spent than these sort of universities where people are getting degrees that don't really lead to things that are ready-made jobs. So not a terrible answer there. I thought that was fine.
Mr. Oz, Mr. Fetterman, if elected, what would you do for vocational education? You have 30 seconds.
Again, I think it's just the same way university for degrees as well too. Supporting that and partnering with the unions and making sure that vocation training are is affordable, and providing the resources to make sure everyone has the opportunity. Going to college isn't the right choice for every person, but going to those kind of vocational schools, able to create a career to reach a lot of high salary, and again, supporting to reduce those costs are critical too.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Dennis.
Moving now, multiple members of Congress, specifically.
Let me just. Again, one of his better answers, still very mush-mouth, didn't really say anything. If you just took a transcript of what they said and couldn't hear them saying, it's clear that Dr. Oz is saying more. You might say, well, Dr. Oz isn't heavy on specifics either, but think of what he's doing. I've been to these schools. I went, and I saw, and 2,000 people could be there instead of 1,000. And if we get them there, they'll have these ready-made jobs, right? And then look at what Fetterman said. Even if you take out his delivery where he could barely speak, he's just basically saying, I think it's important to fund vocational jobs. And I think it's something that will help us. So even if you didn't see this or hear this, if you were just reading a transcript that took out the ums and the uhs and things like that, and just had their basic ideas, it's clear on every topic, Dr. Oz is saying far more than Fetterman. Now, you might not agree with some of the things Oz is saying, but Fetterman is as bland as you could get on every topic. It's important to do X. We should fund X. That's it.
Democrats have called for the Supreme Court to be expanded. Candidates, we want to know where you stand on this. Mr. Fetterman, should the Supreme Court be expanded? And if so, by how many justices? You have 60 seconds.
I don't believe, I don't stand, and I don't believe in that. I fundamentally believe that even though I don't agree with the ideological breakup of the Supreme Court, I believe it's not about changing the rules. It's about acknowledging where we're at, much the way the Republicans want to try to change the Constitution about how our Supreme Court in Pennsylvania is going to be done, and I don't support that. So I think it's critical that we be consistent, and I do not believe in supporting the Supreme Court.
Mr. Oz, same question to you.
Okay, again, I don't believe in Supreme Court, another misspeak, etc. Other than that, not a terrible end. I mean, I obviously, for my biases, I don't want someone that wants to pack the Supreme Court. Fetterman, as sort of a Bernie-type Democrat, you might expect him to say, yes, it's important to do that. He doesn't, and he answers quite directly there. No, I don't support that. I don't agree with the court, but I don't support. And then he does what I was sort of praising Oz for doing earlier. He gives a definitive answer and then says, and the Republicans, by the way, wanted to change the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania. Now, that's a far different situation of what's going on, but still, as someone who's just watching the debate, that's an effective strategy. Give a definitive answer and then say, this is why the other side is bad on this question. So I actually think that, honest to goodness, I think that's his strongest answer to boot. I think that he did that is effective. He still obviously has a delivery that is very stilted, but that was one of his best arguments.
Should the Supreme Court be expanded? If so, by how many justices? You have 60 seconds.
I would never touch the makeup of the Supreme Court, and I would advocate to leave it the exact same size it is. But John Fetterman's radical positions have spilled over into what he would do in Washington. One of the first things he has said, and he came back to the campaign trail, is that he wanted to bust the filibuster, which means removing the brakes on the Senate overreacting. That's
true. That is true.
But if you do that, then you would free up the Democrats in the Senate without getting the normal amount of votes to actually expand the Supreme Court, add more states, do things that are detrimental to the well-being of the country. So I think, on your first day back, arguing that we should get rid of the filibuster is a dangerously radical move that would hurt Washington. It's not in our nation's best interest.
Thank you both very much.
Interesting. They let Fetterman interrupt there. That's okay. I don't mind that as much, but I mentioned earlier that wasn't really happening. But Fetterman admits, yes, I would end the filibuster. I think Oz is good. This is a good answer. Definitively no, don't pack the court. Of course he's going to say that. He's Republican, so no surprise there. And then you basically got a free 55 seconds to talk about other things that you want. And so he says, on that level, though, you want to get rid of the filibuster, which would allow the packing of the court. I think that he misses an opportunity here to explain to the average person that might not understand the of what the filibuster is or what the implications are. So without thinking just off the top of my head, he might say, Fetterman wants to get rid of the filibuster, and Fetterman chimes in with, yes, that's right, I do. And I'd say, yes, exactly. At least he's honest about it. This is very anti-democratic. What this is one side that wants to change the rules because they have a slight majority, or in this case, no majority, and tie, and they realize their policies are very unpopular, such as their open border policies, such as their massive spending and inflation policies, such as their war on fossil fuels. And the only thing preventing even worse impacts is that right now there's a filibuster, which means they need 2/3 of the vote. If they eliminated it, all of the things we see terrible with the Biden administration right now would be made far worse. This is a direct attack on democracy. This will lead to the packing of the Supreme Court, and this is exactly what they accuse us of Republicans of wanting to do. It's them that want to get rid of norms. It's them that want to harm our democracy. That would have been a better way for Dr. Oz to go about it, because a lot of people that maybe you that are watching me, we understand. I'm not claiming to be a genius, but we at least understand what the filibuster is, and we understand the implications of why Democrats are saying we want to get rid of the filibuster. But I'm not so sure that the average person that's only lightly following politics that's tuned into this debate really understands that. So Oz, right instincts to take this to, okay, another issue tangentially connected to packing the courts is ending the filibuster. That's radical. That's what Fetterman wants to do. But I think he could have done a better job explaining what the implications of that are.
Much.
All right, at this time, we are ready for our closing statements. You each have 90 seconds to convince Pennsylvanians to vote for you on Election Day. Mr. Fetterman, you are first, 90 seconds.
Once again, I would just like to say that my campaign is all about fighting for anyone in Pennsylvania that ever got knocked down, that had to get back up again. I'm also fighting for any forgotten community all across Pennsylvania that ever got knocked down, that had to be made to get back up. I've made my entire career dedicating to those kinds of pursuits. I started as a GED instructor back in Braddock over 20 years ago because I believe it's about serving Pennsylvania, not about using Pennsylvania for their own end interests as well. To me, careers are revealed by your real underlying values. And my values have always been about fighting for forgotten communities all across Pennsylvania.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fetterman. Mr. Oz.
Again, it's very stilted. Not much said there. Let me give his speech. The theme of what he's saying, it's clear that they focus grouped, and it's clear that what the message he wanted to get out is, I'm fighting for the underdog. So let me give Fetterman's speech here just off the top of my head. I got into politics because I'm like you. I'm an average person. I didn't come from immense wealth. I didn't come from let me pause here. I don't know if he came from an Ivy League. I'm talking about myself instead of Fetterman. So let me backtrack. I'm one of you. I'm someone that sees people that live in all areas of society, whether it be the awesome workers that work in coal mines, that work in construction, that work as truck drivers, or it be people that live in inner city communities that sometimes have needed help, that have seen all sorts of economic and crime problems ravage their community, or whether it be the professor or the person that's an entrepreneur that's maybe more well-to-do financially. I understand that all of these people need someone that can support them and someone that will fight for them, and that's who I am. That's why I got involved in politics in the first place, because I saw that we had politicians that were more interested in increasing their own power and increasing their own fortunes. And that's what my opponent, Dr. Oz, did. He's trying to buy a seat. It's someone that's already rich and thinks that he could use that money and influence to come into this state from outside it and be able to buy the seat. I've lived here my whole life. I've fought for people, not just the entrepreneurs, who it's important to fight for, not just the people that have power and influence. And it is important that they have a voice. But I've also fought for people that were at the opposite end of those scale. And those people are some of the best Pennsylvanians and Americans that I've ever seen. They deserve to have someone in Washington like me that will fight for them. They don't deserve to have someone who is a millionaire doctor that's just trying to buy a seat, that's coming from out of state, that as soon as he gets to Washington will forget about these people. I am a Pennsylvanian through and through. I will fight for the communities in this country or in this state, and I'll do everything I can to ensure that once I'm in the Senate, that even the people that may not have supported me in this election, that I'll speak for you and every Pennsylvanian and every American. That's the message that he's trying to articulate, right? Yeah, crudité, maybe you throw that in there. He's out of touch. He didn't use his full 90 seconds. It's clear what the theme that he was trying to say. I'll fight for the underdog. That was the theme of what he was trying to say. But it doesn't come off very well. robnoerr for Senate, right. Again, I assume that'll be the last statement that Fetterman has. We'll wrap up the debate, my thoughts on it here at the end, but not a very compelling final statement there. I might have also, if I'm Fetterman, I may have came back to his stroke there. I may have. I may have tried to make a joke, I may have said something like this, like, I understand that maybe I fumbled words as I said I would. I had a stroke. I know that people in Oz's campaign wanted to mock me for that. But ask yourself this. Wouldn't you rather have someone whose heart's there with you, who fumbles some words occasionally, that's getting better and stronger every day, than someone that's pretending to be a Pennsylvanian, to come in here with their mass wealth and try to buy a Senate seat that really will forget about you as soon as they're in Washington? So yeah, maybe I chopped up some words, but I'm here for you. And my language will get better, but his priorities will never change. Maybe something like that. But obviously that's not happening. So let's see what Oz has to say.
Oz, your final thoughts, 90 seconds.
I've loved traveling to the four corners of the beautiful Commonwealth, and I've heard your problems. I'm a surgeon, doctor. I listened to what you say, and I'm trying to help address them today. I've talked to seniors worried their Social Security checks wouldn't go far enough with the raging inflation. I've talked to couples want to make their first down payment on a new house and they can't afford it anymore because of interest rates. I've talked to families.
You want to cut Social Security.
Mr. Fetterman, it's his turn for his closing.
I've talked to...
Now, this is bad. This is bad for Fetterman. Believe it or not, it's getting worse for Fetterman. And here's why. The one thing that Fetterman has coming out of this is sort of the sympathetic, right? I would have instructed Fetterman if I was trying to coach him up for this debate. Don't interrupt at all. You want to come off as humble, as someone that people feel sorry for. But you lose a lot of that if you're interrupting. Particularly, interrupting is one thing when it's in the heat of the debate. But closing statements in almost all forms of debate, you're not supposed to touch. So this is not a good look. The only possible benefit that Fetterman has coming out of this is a sympathetic character, and the more he's interrupting, particularly in closing, I'm not saying this is like a bomb. Oh my God! But I'm just saying that's not a good look. Perceptually, that's even I don't interrupt people in closing statements, right?
To families worried about fentanyl showing up in their mailbox and literally taking the lives of their children who they find blue in bed. I've talked to families who won't let their kids go outside because of the crime wave that's been facilitated by left radical policy.
Now, what were the issues I said were important? Economy, crime, the border, lockdowns, and indoctrination of children. Those latter two, Oz hasn't talked about. But listen to how his closing statement hit all three of those. And he's making it personal. He says, I've talked to people that can't afford. Bam, talking about the economy. I've talked to people worried about fentanyl. Bam, that's tangentially a connection to the border. I've talked to people worried about crime. That's what your closing statement should be. Your closing statement that you're thinking about the entire time, that you're setting up because you know you're going to get a chance to give an opening and a closing statement. You want to hit the central themes. What are the big 3 issues? What are the big 5 issues? That's what your closing statement should be about. That's very good. And he's not just, thank you, Nightmare Chiro. He's not just mentioning those issues. He's trying to make them personal. I've talked to people worried about this. That's very good. I give high points for so far what he's doing in the closing statement.
Like the ones John Fetterman has been advocating for. But here's the deal, right? None of this has to happen. This is all very addressable. I'm a surgeon. I'm not a politician. We take big problems, we focus on them, and we fix them. We do it by uniting, by coming together, not dividing. And by doing that, we can get ahead. But I've got one question to challenge you with, just one question. If you take what I'm saying to heart, ask yourself this and others in your family. Are you unhappy with where America's headed? I am. And if you are as well, then I'm the candidate for change. I'm a living embodiment of the American dream. I believe we're the land of opportunity, the land of plenty. I believe we can balance a budget without recklessly spending. I believe we can have an unleashed energy policy that helps us all. I believe that we can have safe city streets and a secure border so legal immigrants can come across, but you shut the fentanyl out. I believe we can give parents choice in where their kids go to school. We can have affordable health care. But most of all, I believe in you. And if you can do this together, and we can, I would ask for your vote on Election Day. God bless you.
All right. Now, I think... let's say what he could have done better. All through this debate, he never brings out Tom Wolf's name. He never brings up that John Fetterman is the lieutenant governor right now under the Wolf administration. That's a huge mistake. He brings up Biden a little, but he should also be connecting to Biden. Fetterman to Biden. I wish he would have talked more about lockdowns. Not talking about sort of the school stuff. That's okay. I don't think that that's his fight. It's something I would fight about, but that's not Oz's fight. So I get that. So I think he should have connected and talked more about, and it wouldn't take a lot, just there. He says, I'm not a politician, I'm the candidate for change. All it would take was one line in that closing statement. John Fetterman is the lieutenant governor of this state that locked you down, that encouraged fentanyl abuses, crime abuses, economic abuses. I think we could change that. So I think he should have. It's important for people to know, if you're unhappy right now with what's going on in Pennsylvania, and most Pennsylvanians are, this dude's in the administration. So I think he could have done better there. However, he does very good in this closing statement, other than that. I think I already mentioned that he hit those big topics and he made it personal. He has a cadence that naturally flows for a closing statement. I believe. Right? Go back and listen to how he does this. Listen to his cadence. He sounds like, if you listen to like Martin Luther King talk, if you listen to a lot of civil rights leaders talk, they have this cadence, this sort of repetition of a phrase that then is followed by something that is agreeable to everyone. It's a very compelling way of making yourself sound magnanimous and making yourself sound like you have these glorious big ideas that all of us could come together and agree on. Now, you might say, well, is that really have shit all to say about what his specific policies? No, but this is a closing statement, and you're trying to perceptually sell yourself. And it's clear that one of the things the Oz campaign, Fetterman, his theme where he's talking is, I'm fighting for the underdog, right? I'm supporting the average person. It's clear that's what his theme was. He did a poor job articulating it like he did poorly throughout the whole debate. It is clear that what Dr. Oz's team was talking about was crime, border, economy. And then the defense that they have to play is, Trump supported you, you're a divider. So he's the one that keeps saying, we have to come together. We have to be civil. We have to be able to speak to people. Now, I don't necessarily, that's not a message that's really geared towards me. But for a general election, it's clear that they think that on the issues, they're going to win, because on the direction that the state and the country is going, Democrats aren't doing good. So the question is, are these Republicans too radical? And so Oz is trying to bring that message home. And listen to what I'm saying about the cadence here. Listen to how he finishes up here.
Land of opportunity, the land of plenty. I believe we can balance a budget without recklessly spending. I believe we can have an unleashed energy policy that helps us all. I believe that we can have safe city streets and a secure border so legal immigrants can come across, but you shut the fentanyl out. I believe we can give parents choice in where their kids go to school. We can have affordable health care. But most of all, I believe in you. And if you can do this together, and we can, I would ask for your vote on Election Day. God bless.
Makes it personal. He talks specifically, I need your help. Vote for me. It's good stuff. That's good, rhetorician stuff. It is. Let's finish out and hear what the mods have to say to finish, and then I'll give sort of my closing thoughts.
We do have one final question, an important issue in Pennsylvania. The eyes of the state are on this debate tonight, but on Sunday they will be on Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia as the state's two NFL teams go head-to-head. Mr. Fetterman, Steelers or Eagles, and why?
Oh, clearly, always for the Steelers.
Mr.
Oh, good answer, Fetterman. No, that's a terrible still shot. I myself am a Steelers fan, but trying to the moderators a little brevity at the end.
Oz.
I'll be at the game rooting for my Eagles. Fly, Eagles, fly.
Gentlemen, thank you both.
Oh, boy. Maybe I'm voting for Fetterman now. Just kidding.
So much. This does conclude our debate. We do want to thank our candidates for being with us, Mr. Fetterman and Mr. Oz, and for all of you at home who have been watching. Thank you so much.
And we want to thank our team at WHTM for hosting us at their studios tonight. Remember, voters, that Election Day is just 2 weeks from today on Tuesday, November 8th. Thanks for being with us, and have a great night.
All right. We did it. We made it through the debate. Whoo! Man. So, if you're just joining, I did policy debate in college. It's a little different. You talk as fast as humanly possible. Everything comes down to nuclear war. You talk about all these policies, the same thing happen every day. You have all these divisions, be able to talk at the top level. It's one of the top 72 things that the country was able to do pretty good, but as a man of do say, that's what policy debate is. It's different. It's not like this style of open forum public debate. Different, or not open forum in this case. But I debated. I was a pretty good debater. I was a judge of policy debate. And so I've judged a lot of debates. And I think that makes me qualified, maybe more than an average person, to look at... Maurice, I can't right now, but I will, I swear. It makes me a little more... Well, give me a chance. Let's see if I can. Let's mod you. It makes me a little more qualified than maybe the average person to be able to, analyze a debate or something like that. I'll mod you anyways. So I like looking at debates, and I need to do it more often and say, this is what I think is good, here's opportunities missed, here's what their strategy is, and I hope you all got something of that while I was doing this. But I can't help but feel that any of that level of, analysis that's unique to me or to people that have judged debates like me is sort of irrelevant in this debate. And that's because the elephant in the room. You don't need someone to tell you what happened in that debate. All the little interesting things that I'm saying about closing statements and could have said this and could have said that, I guess that might be interesting to you. But that's so far down the line of what just happened. That was one of the worst debate performances I have ever seen. And I don't just mean at sort of the national stage level. I mean anywhere. I mean judging high school debates. I saw a Twitter thread from some mainstream media shill today that was saying, it was laying the groundwork for Fetterman's poor performance, and it said, you know, Fetterman was never a good debater. It's not his style. He's a man of the people. He doesn't really talk like that, like you need to in a debate. They knew what was going to happen. That Fetterman wasn't going to look good, so they're laying the groundwork. It's not just his illness. And maybe there's truth to that. I have to admit, I've seen Fetterman speak before this run for office. I've seen him speak as lieutenant governor. I've never seen him in a debate. So maybe he was poor at debates. So I don't know how much of his poor performance was because of his illness and because of his stroke, or because that he's just not good anyways. But it's sort of irrelevant. Whatever reason that people want to give for his poor performance, it's irrelevant. That guy can't be senator. That guy's not capable of doing the day-to-day, everyday things that are required of a town councilman, let alone a senator. 6 years? In the most significant congressional body in the country? We're in such a swing state that this vote literally could change the direction of the country? And that's the guy you're going to suggest putting in there? Democrats have no good faith claim as to why John Fetterman should be there. They purely have to rely on, well, let's be honest, it doesn't really matter who the senator is. We just need it to be a Democrat because Republicans are evil. See, this is the new establishment model. I joked about this a couple weeks ago. Once I saw the NBC interview with Fetterman, I said, Joe Biden doesn't know where he's at half the time. Fetterman's worse. Who are they going to nominate next? A coma victim? It's sad. It's pathetic. You kind of feel bad watching Fetterman struggle up there, but not really, because he is a radical. But even worse than that, Fetterman brought this on himself. He could have dropped out during the primaries. He had his stroke then. Listen, let's be clear. You could be a stroke victim and still say, I have to keep running because I don't want to give this seat up to the Republicans. I got to be a team player, so I got to get out and do this. And then if you win, you say, okay, I can't handle it after a couple months, and then they have another election or something. But that's not what happened. It's not, well, he has to stay in now or else Oz wins. What happened was, him, or more likely his wife and the people around him, encouraged him not to drop out during the primary. Had he dropped out during the primary, then another Democrat would have been nominated, and we would have Dr. Oz versus that Democrat. Whoever that Democrat was would have been better than John Fetterman. I mean anyone. Even if it was 2 to 3 days before the primary. I don't know exactly how long it was before. He should have withdrawn. For the good. I'm saying this as a Democrat. As a Republican, hey, go forward, man. I don't care. You're just hurting the Democrats' chances. But as a Democrat, I'd be pissed. I'd say, really? You didn't step down? It's clear it was a serious stroke if it's left him this affected months afterwards. So how bad can you feel for the guy? He did it. He chose to stay in the race. When he could have, again, it would be different if the stroke happened after the primary, because then you could say, well, he feels like he has to, so the Republicans don't win. That's not what happened. That's selfishness. On his part and his loved one's part that let him go through with it. This performance was horrible. If you take out the image and the audio and just the transcribed words, and you even cleaned up the transcript so it didn't have all the filler words and the repetition, he said nothing. There was no substance. I'm not saying Oz had a 100% perfect debate, but he did pretty good. He did better than I expected. I'd give Oz a B+. Fetterman gets an F-. Even without the perception of the image, he said nothing. And then when you factor in anyone who's watching, it's just like, my God, this is horrible. It is sad in a sense. But again, he should have dropped out. I mean, I agree with the people that said that the worst part was the fracking situation. That conversation on fracking, that's one of the worst moments I have ever seen in a debate.
Families, and it has given...
I'll show you the part again if I can find it real quick. Oh, here's the parts I missed, by the way. Let's go back and see them. There was a part in abortion with the audio cut out. Let's see if I can find it.
And why? 30 seconds.
Dishonest. On this debate stage, he said very specifically in his primary debate, when he was still debating, that he would support 38 weeks of mandated rules by the federal government that would prevent any state from blocking it. So that's not Roe versus Wade.
That's not true. I support Roe v. Wade. That's the simple.
John, you said specifically you would support a federal rule on 38 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's important that John at least acknowledge that he's not honest here, because you said the opposite on TV.
Mr. Oz, we must continue on. Mr. Fetterman, turning to you, we have a follow-up question. Would you support allocating federal funds to transport women who live in states where abortion is banned to states where they can get one, and why? 30 seconds.
I would. I would, because I believe abortion rights is a universal right for all women in America. I believe that abortion is health care, and I believe that that is a choice that belongs with each woman and their doctor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fetterman. Turning to
Nachos, that's something that I noticed and I forgot to say. I agree with you. You can kind of see the facial expressions on Oz like, wow. And I think he did a good job of restraining himself, not just being like, are you serious? Look at this guy. He can't really say that because he needs to come off as somewhat compassionate, but I agree with that. Woman, he did say woman, didn't he? Transphobe.
To the next issue, Dennis.
Thank you, Lisa. Let's turn to what has become one of the key themes of this race, fitness to serve. For these individual questions, there will be no rebuttals allowed. Mr. Fetterman, we begin with you. You suffered, as you mentioned a moment ago, a stroke 4 days before the May primary. Last week, you released this note from your doctor saying you can work full duty in public office, but you have not released your detailed medical records surrounding your stroke. Mr. Fetterman, will you pledge tonight to release those records in the interest of transparency? You have 60 seconds.
No. To me, for transparency is about showing up. I'm here today to have a debate. I have, speeches in front of 3,000 people in Montgomery County, all across Pennsylvania, big crowds. I believe if my doctor believes that I'm fit to serve, and that's what I believe is appropriate. And now with 2 weeks before the election, I have run a campaign and I've been very transparent about being very open about the fact we're in use captioning. And I believe that, again, my doctors, the real doctors that I believe in, they all believe that I'm ready to be served.
Follow up, I didn't hear you say you would release your full medical records. Why not? You have 30 seconds.
No, again, my doctor all believes that I'm fit to be serving, and that's what I believe is where I'm standing.
Oh.
So, right, no answer. Okay, so what I take that answer to mean is judge for yourself, like Biden said the other day. Judge with your eyes. Okay. Sure. We'll judge with our eyes. He doesn't have an answer why he's not giving those records up. I can understand if it's like, well, okay, I'll release my records regarding the stroke, but I'm not going to release the rest of my private medical information. I mean, wow. See, the audio cut out in this part. So.
Okay, Mr. Fetterman, thank you. Mr. Oz, you have built a lucrative career around medicine, but you've been criticized even by some fellow physicians for promoting, quote, unproven, ill-advised, and at times potentially dangerous treatments. What is your response to that? You have 60 seconds.
One of the great blessings of traveling around Pennsylvania is you run into people who have watched the show. They thank me very much for giving them life-saving advice on chronic issues like high blood pressure or dealing with their anxiety. The show did very well because it provided high-quality information that empowered people, which was exactly what I want to do when I'm a senator. Give people the power. Let them make decisions for their well-being. Now, John Fetterman's approach to health is a very dangerous one. He believes we should socialize medicine. He embraced this with Bernie Sanders, who he endorsed. The two candidates call themselves the two most progressive people in America. When you have socialized medicine, Dennis, you shut down the ability of people to get access to health care. Doctors stop practicing. There are no medications available. The lines get long. It's a disaster, and it puts people at risk. So I don't believe we should allow socialized medicine, the abolition of all private health care insurance in America, and radical positions like the ones taken by John Fetterman make them too extreme to serve. If we're going to bring balance to Washington, you got to bring people who understand the ramifications. Even Joe Biden called John Fetterman's idea, I'll quote him, preposterous.
Mr. Fetterman, I'm going to let you respond in just a minute, but I have a follow-up for you first.
Not a bad answer, nothing specific. I was a little distracted there, but...
Mr. Oz, did you or your company make a profit from promoting those products? You have 30 seconds.
I never sold weight loss products as described in those commercials. It's a television show, like this is a television show, so people can run commercials on the shows, and that's a perfectly appropriate and very transparent process. I ruffled a lot of feathers on my show because I told people the truth, and I'm proud of that. I'll do the exact same thing as a U.S. senator. But there's no way to defend what John Fetterman has done with socialized medicine. That is a radical departure from what we in America have accepted. A relationship between you, John, you'll have your turn. John, let me finish.
I must respond to that.
There must be a relationship between a doctor and a patient, and that's what I would direct patients to do.
Thank you. Mr. Fetterman, he accused you of socialized medicine, supporting socialized medicine. What is your response?
Yeah, again, it's the Oz rule. He's on TV and he's lying. I never supported any of that thing. You know, he keeps talking about Bernie Sanders. You know, 3 years ago he was on his show and he hugged him and he said, "I love this guy. You know what? Why don't you pretend that you live in Vermont instead of Pennsylvania and run against Bernie Sanders? Because all you can do is talk about Bernie Sanders. Because my truth is that healthcare is a basic fundamental right." And I believe in expanding that, and I believe about fighting for health care, the kind of health care that saved my life.
Dennis, that was dishonest.
Well, he had less pauses there. I kind of feel bad that audio cut out. I didn't do that intentionally the first time. He actually had less stuttering there and still did speech there than he had. And I think that's a sort of an effective line to say, if you got a problem with Bernie, run against Bernie, I'm different. That's not a bad line of attack. It doesn't really address the specifics of Medicare for all, socialized medicine, but interesting.
He explicitly supported socialized
Mr. Oz,
medicine.
we have a lot of topics to get to. I think we did this. Lisa, you go ahead.
We are going to move on to the next topic, and this has come up earlier, and that is the issue of fracking. Pennsylvania.
Line for this common
this is the repeat. We saw
absolutely support fracking.
Job to help Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Oz.
This is the worst I saw in this whole debate. I mean, this is the clip.
Oz rule.
Mr. Fetterman, 15
I
seconds.
absolutely support fracking. In fact, I live across the street from a steel mill, and they were going to frack to create their own energy in order to make them more competitive. And I support that, living closer to anybody else in Pennsylvania for fracking to myself. I believe that we need independence with energy, and I believe I've walked that line my entire career. I believe Democrats...
Mr. Fetterman, I do have a specific question which you can continue on this topic, but you have made two conflicting statements regarding fracking. In a 2018 interview, you said, quote, "I don't support fracking at all. I never have." But earlier this month, you told an interviewer, quote, "I support fracking. I support the energy independence that we should have here in the United States." So, Mr. Fetterman, please explain your changing position. 60 seconds.
I've always supported fracking. And I always believe that independence with our energy is critical. We can't be held, ransom to somebody like Russia. I've always believed that energy independence is critical, and I've always believed that, and I do support fracking. I've never taken any money from their industry, but I support how critical it is that we produce our own energy and create energy independence.
I must correct the record.
Just a second, Mr. Oz. I do want to clarify something. You're saying tonight that you support fracking, that you've always supported fracking, but there is that 2018 interview that you said, quote, "I don't support fracking at all." So how do you square the two?
Oh my God.
I do support fracking, and I support fracking, and I stand and I do support fracking.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fetterman.
Unbelievable. That's unbelievable. That's just, in a nutshell, that's the debate. Nothing there. You said you don't support fracking. What do you say to that? Awkward 10-second pause. I support fracking. I support fracking. I mean, that's it. How can you trust anything he says with that blatant? That's so bad. Now, I'm just scrolling. Just scrolling a little. I see the WPXI, that's the local TV station that put on the debate. They put a poll up, and that poll says that 83% of people that voted say that Dr. Oz won. I'm actually shocked that some 13% thought that Fetterman won. I understand that you'll never see one of those that's 100%, but it's shocking. Let's take a trip through Twitter, shall we? Let's see what's going on. What the messaging out on Twitter is. Just scrolling through. The Philadelphia Inquirer's editorial writers, columnists, and contributors collectively thought Fetterman performed better than Oz in the debate. Again, what did I tell you? That's literally the first thing that popped up. I told you that the thing to watch, other than how bad Fetterman did, was how all of your institutions lie to you so blatantly. The same people that were telling you that you had to lock down for COVID and you had to make sacrifices for Ukraine and you had to, your kids had to wear masks and be locked down from schools, that were the experts, the journalists that told you that Trump was a Russian spy and the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. The average person, these are complicated issues many times that it's difficult to look into. But anyone who watched that debate saw Fetterman got crushed. And so when the experts are telling you, actually, Fetterman won, that's how much they gaslight and bullshit you on a daily basis. They are clowning themselves. And that, to me, is going to be the most interesting thing to see. Let's see what else we got. Just scrolling through. I'm sure we'll hear about how ableist everyone is. Here's Anna Navarro, what she said. Fetterman's aware he has auditory and processing issues as a result of a stroke. He could have refused the debate like some candidates have. Instead, he went out there and let voters see his challenges and healing process. That takes courage, humility, and it's such bullshit. Matt Whitlock says, all eyes on the reporters and media figures who lied to voters and said Fetterman was just fine after Dasha Burns pointed out he had obvious challenges that voters deserve to know. Absolutely. Barry Weiss says, the Fetterman-Oz debate is absolutely shocking. Dasha Burns was the only reporter who told the truth about Fetterman's state. But it is so much worse than inability to track small talk. It's painful to watch this. Absolutely. Stephen Miller says, they lied and Dasha Burns deserves an apology for this person sicking the entirety of Twitter journos on her. Kara Swisher, when she said October 11, I talked with John Fetterman for an hour without stop or any aids. This is nonsense. Piers Morgan says, the PA Senate debate was painful to watch. I feel sorry for John Fetterman that he suffered a stroke, but it's cruel of his team to expose him to such ridicule when he's clearly unfit to either take part in TV debates or to be a fully functional senator. He should withdraw. Absolutely. Chris Cuomo, let's see what Cuomo said.
definitely, I'm an independent, by the way. I was definitely leaning towards Fetterman, and I think I have totally changed to the Oz side.
Why?
I felt that Fetterman just looked like he didn't have command of the facts. I do think his condition, unfortunately, is going to affect his ability to do the job. I thought Oz was pretty clear on the issues, and I thought he presented himself well and definitely threw out some plans where I didn't see any plans coming out of Fetterman.
All right, appreciate it. Not surprised that it made you change, but who knows? Between now and Election Day, you may change again. Eric, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Jessica.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hey, how you doing? Thank you so much for being a part of this tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. And what did you feel coming out of the debate?
Well, I am a registered Democrat, and I was really focused on what I would hear from the candidates on the issue of abortion, because I want to have control over my own maternal health choices. And so, honestly, I was pleased to hear from Oz that he would vote against a federal abortion ban. That kind of surprised me and definitely drew a line in the sand between him and Mastriano, who I think is a very dangerous person to be in the governor's seat in Pennsylvania.
So you believed Oz in his position, and even though a Democrat, did that mean that you want to vote for him now? I haven't heard you mention your candidate, Fetterman.
Yeah, I was kind of shocking to see Fetterman. I will say that I think that he improved through the course of the debate. I think that he kind of got his footing, and it's good to hear from experts that they think that he might continue to improve over the course of the next few months. And so I'm not 100% sure where I'm going to go on election.
Wow. When you are losing, when you are John Fetterman, and you are losing people that's like, my number one issue is abortion, and after this debate, I'm considering voting for Dr. Oz. That's incredible. Clay Travis says, betting markets were close to even in the PA Senate race when tonight's debate started. This is where they're at right now. I've never seen line movement like this based on a single 1 hour debate. Now it has 63% to 39% Oz over Fetterman. It's brutal. Bob Casey, Democrat, Senator Casey, just said Fetterman's debate answers were very direct. And now I have serious questions about Bob Casey's fitness to serve. Absolutely. Do not leave them gaslight you and live this down. These people are full of shit. Eric Erickson says, notice all the people who think Herschel Walker isn't fit for the Senate are still fine with Fetterman after seeing this performance. Greg Price says, after watching this debate, keep a few things in mind. First, early voting's been going on in PA for 4 weeks. Yep, it's why early voting sucks. Second, John Fetterman refuses to release his medical records. Third, liberals told us that an NBC reporter was ableist for saying Fetterman struggled to talk with her. One more thing to keep in mind. Fetterman was that bad he had closed captioning in front of him and every accommodation he could want. Now imagine how bad he speaks without it at all. Poll from WPXI, 82% think that Oz won the debate. I mean, it's just, where's all the lefty Twitch streamers? Where are they at? Where's all the lefties that I debate? Huh? Where's all the lefties that were talking about how Herschel Walker's not fit to serve? Where are they? Where are they now? Every single one of these debates that I've seen, whether it be Blake Masters, whether it be J.D. Vance, whether it be Ron DeSantis, are crushing these Democrats. The Democrats' ideas are horrible, and they're so entitled to having all of our institutions push their garbage, that when they're forced to confront intelligent people that are articulate in pointing out how horrible their ideas are, they get crushed. That's why they rely on censorship. This, in a nutshell, is why they are so freaked out about Elon Musk buying Twitter. I don't think Musk is some conservative. Hell, Musk might do a terrible job with Twitter if he buys it. But the fear from Democrats is they know that they are shit. And if they don't have total control over the flow of information, everyone else will know their shit too. That's why they want early voting. That's why they want to hide from debates. Because they can't win on the merits of their candidates and their ideas. And so now they're out there gaslighting you. Mark my words, before this debate ended, while I was in the middle of it, before I read anything, I said, here's what they'll do. 1, they'll say that Fetterman did pretty good. 2nd, that it's ableist to point out that he did poorly. 3rd, they'll focus on something Dr. Oz said that they think is wrong or terrible, blah, blah, blah. And then 4th, after a day or two, they won't mention the debate anymore. And that's exactly the predictable steps that they're taking. It's surreal. It is the worst debate performance I have ever seen. No one in their right mind can think that that man is fit to serve. If you're voting for John Fetterman, you are literally voting for a placeholder because you don't want Republicans in there. You just want a Democratic body. By the way, that's why you voted for Joe Biden too. And they're clowning themselves out there today. They're desperate. They need these seats. They're so desperate that they have to go. Imagine working for MSNBC and having to haul yourself in front of the cameras and say, I think Fetterman did great. How much money would it take to make you comfortable clowning yourself like that in front of the world? I think Philadelphia Inquirer's editors, they soberly looked at the debate and said, we think Fetterman won. How much money do you need to sell out any shred of dignity to tell such a blatant lie such as that? Paulie, people may have been listening here. Yeah. I wouldn't vote for her for Senate either. Oh, man. Well, there you have it. Thursday, tomorrow night, I should be streaming from my home office. We'll talk more about this debate and the fallout for it, I guess. Thursday, I'll be streaming a little early at 8 p.m. I will be doing my final show with Lecture Fan before the election, so I'm sure he'll have a lot to say about this debate performance. My God. Huge implications for Pennsylvania here and what happened. I mean, I'm less thinking this. Imagine if we had an actual, like, America First Republican. The argument against Kathy Barnett was that, she won't be electable in a general. She literally would have been the best chance ever because it is the worst candidate being ran on the Democratic side. If Pennsylvania legitimately votes for John Fetterman, we deserve all of the horrible shit that comes our way. Let's just hope it's a fair election. All right, let's see who we could raid. We'll raid Fabian. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Raid Fabian. Truly historical for the political implications, but also historical for just to see one of the worst debate performances you'll ever see, and to just see how disingenuous our media class is, our political class is, that are going to try to gaslight you that you didn't just see how bad that was. So, man. So, I'll see you all tomorrow around 9 p.m. Eastern. I'll have better quality. Please, if you like this show, recommend it to some other people. I really enjoy each and every one of you. I think I'm one of the best conservative streamers on Twitch, on YouTube. Follow me at comfy.stream. I'm Rob Noor on there, so look for me there. But yeah, I really appreciate. What's this? And the way you can help me is by recommending me to other people. I'd really appreciate it. So thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy this rate of Fabian Liberty. Hope you enjoyed the debate. As always, have a good one.
I think we should have a history like Abraham Lincoln believed in our founding.
Okay. I don't know if I would go with 1619 talking about slavery to then Lincoln.
Right. Okay, now I understand why you said robnoerr coming in hot. Thanks to the raid, robnoerr. I appreciate it. We're just going over the DeSantis-Crist debate. I debated synth earlier. It was a lot of fun. Can't believe I missed the synth debate. Yeah, you just showed. Did you?